Members, so that is us now into open session for this afternoon's sitting of the Education Committee. Housekeeping first, I would advise members that the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online, and I would advise anyone in the public gallery that they are welcome to use mobile devices as long as they're in airplane mode and that all devices are muted. It's not permitted to take photographs or record any part of the meeting. So item 1 on the agenda is apologies. I don't have any apologies, but we do have Cara and John joining us remotely. So I don't think they're on the call yet, but hopefully they will be able to join us, and I don't think there have been any other apologies unless any members have got any. No. So that takes us to item 2 on the agenda then, and that is chairperson's business. I'm just going to say at the start of the meeting, as we've had a couple of items in previous weeks in closed session, I'll just say at the top of the agenda, it is likely, just subject to committee agreement, that a part of item 6 may be taken in closed session, and there's also one piece of confidential correspondence which we might bring forward again with members' agreement to item 6. So it's just for anybody viewing the committee to be aware that there could be just a period of time at item 6 there where we're in closed session. I would hope that it won't be too long, but that could be within the next sort of 5 to 10 minutes. In terms of other items of chairperson's business, I would just refer members, this is really just for noting, to the GTCNI bill and explanatory memorandum. That's on pages 4 and 24 of your tabled paper. So the bill was introduced to the Assembly this week, and second stage is scheduled for Tuesday of next week. So again, it really is just to bring that to members' attention. If I could also draw members' attention to page 36 of tabled papers, came in late but time sensitive, so just so members are aware that the Minister is intending to make a written ministerial statement this week, I believe, on the Department and the EA's response to Storm Amy, but I would suggest for noting at this stage. Okay, so that then moves us on to item 3, which is declarations of interest. Do any members have a declaration about any item on today's agenda they need to make? No. If that should change and anything needs to be noted, please do so during the course of the meeting. Item 4 on the agenda there is matters arising. So a couple of things just to bring to members' attention. So there has been some additional information provided by the Senkos, who had previously briefed committee back on the 15th of October. That's at pages 7 and 21 of your packs, and then also their workload survey results at page 28. The department had asked if the committee would be content to share the survey with it, and the witnesses have confirmed they're happy for us to do so. So I just want to check with members if they are content that all those papers referred to are now shared with the department. Are we agreed? Yep. Agreed. I would also suggest members may want to just take note of that additional material sent through by the Senkos, as it's definitely relevant for our evidence today with the EA. So we then have correspondence at page 37 of tabled papers. I'd asked the clerk just to table this it was a correspondent who initially had contacted the committee regarding concerns around safeguarding provisions currently in place in relation to private tutoring. The individual is, as far as I know, engaged in the private tutoring industry, but is raising just some concerns around some lack of protection and also maybe lack of quality control in the sector. So happy to hear members' views on this. The last action we have, I believe, was to raise with the Department of Health and to also to ask the Children and Young People Strategy Child Protection Group for an update on the issue once they had the opportunity to discuss it. The individual does raise some key concerns about a service that's in high demand but entirely unregulated. I would note that I think those concerns and around committee we've agreed that we understand those, and I think it is notable that it is a provider actually seeking regulation on this, which is maybe not always the normal scenario, clearly highlighting risks that parents and providers could potentially be exposed to. So I would be minded to advise him really on the basis of reassuring if we're content to go back to say that the committee does take this issue seriously, but we feel it would be appropriate to wait for an update from the Children and Young People Strategy Child Protection Group. But if the information coming back from that is light on detail or light on concrete actions, I would certainly be open to hearing from EA and the department on this matter. And I would also suggest, if we've not already done so, that we potentially share that correspondence with the Health Committee also, as the safeguarding function does sit largely with that department as well. Quite a bit in there, but are members agreed on that? Does anyone have any views they want to add to that at all? Otherwise, agreed. Agreed. Okay, that takes us on then to item 5 on the agenda, and that's draft minutes. So I'd refer members to the draft minutes of the Education Committee meeting of the 19th of November 2025, and that's at page 103. Can I get agreement that the minutes are a complete and accurate record of proceedings? Is that agreed? Agreed. Agreed. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so members, that takes us to item 6 on the agenda, and I would refer members to the clerk's briefing material provided in your tabled papers. I would want to suggest that we have a brief conversation just in closed session, just to allow a full discussion around the proposed committee bill, if members are agreed, and if we could also get agreement on that single item of correspondence, which is potentially confidential in nature, as it names an individual witness who previously presented to committee, and I would be just cautious around discussing one named individual in open session, if members are agreed. Agreed. Okay, we can move into closed session then. Okay, that is us back into open session. So I'll just ask the clerk to confirm any decisions taken during that session, although I would just note we had referenced a piece of confidential correspondence that was going to be dealt with. The copies of that correspondence weren't available at this moment in time, so we may need to deal with that later in the agenda, or potentially at next week's committee, just for anyone watching proceedings. But clerk, in terms of the committee bill item.
Okay. So the committee just continued its discussion on a proposed committee bill, and having considered a range of options, timelines and other parameters, there was consensus to proceed with a committee bill around a single objective, namely to mandate the right for girls to wear trousers and not to wear skirts.
Thank you. And just to reflect the discussion just in a little bit more detail, to be clear, there were a range of the views expressed during the discussions around this, with some members having preferred a much wider ranging bill, other members taking the view they didn't want any bill to proceed, but that we were not going to stand in the way of a single issue one. So there were a range of views discussed, and this is a position of committee consensus that has been reached on the issue, which will be picked up then at next week's meeting. Okay, so if members are content, then we'll move on to item 7 on the agenda, and that is an oral briefing. It's under the theme of addressing educational underachievement, and it is going to be presented by the Phoenix Education Centre from East Belfast. So I would refer members to a briefing note from the committee clerk at page 111, a raised paper on educational underachievement at page 112, and a briefing paper and presentation from Phoenix Education, which is at page 43 of your tabled papers. So I'll let the witnesses get settled, and then we can take it from there. But I'll do brief introductions. We have joining us today and presenting. We have Emma Shaw, the Executive Director from Phoenix Education. We have Malaki Beggs, a young person attending Phoenix Education Centre, and Victoria Black, also a young person attending Phoenix Education Centre. So you're all very, very welcome today, and thank you for joining us. This is an evidence session that feeds into one of the committee's strategic priorities. I think it probably broadens out into other areas as well. It probably will cover other aspects of education policy, and not just the education underachievement. So we are looking forward to hearing from you. We'll begin with a presentation from yourselves. So we thank you for your briefing paper, but anything that you want to speak to in the public session now, it is over to you. We'd ask for that to be up to 10 minutes in length. Then we'll move into questions from members, and we would ask in the region of 5 minutes per inquiry for each member. So if members and witnesses can just keep a wee eye on the time in terms of making sure we do give everyone the opportunity to ask their questions. But over to yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, as you said, my name is Emma Shaw from Phoenix Education Centre. Chair and members, before I begin, I want to acknowledge that 2 young people have joined me today. They are both current participants at Phoenix Education Centre, and they represent many others across our community. As this is a public session, I'd like to respectfully ask members to be mindful that their questions should focus on the experiences of learning with the young people and not on any personal or family circumstances, so that they can contribute confidently and safely where they choose to do so. I'm not sure if you can see the slides.
Not at the moment.
Not in their packs, are
Yeah, page
Aye.
table.
We do have them in our packs, but not
Yeah.
on the screen.
No, that's okay.
But,
Okay, does that nice.
yeah, but we can access them in our packs.
We've got them,
that's-
we've got them in
that's
front of
fine.
us.
Yeah.
Okay, so just on slide 1 then, please. So I grew up in Inner East Belfast in some of the most deprived wards in Northern Ireland when it comes to educational outcomes. When I was at university, I often heard academics say that working class Protestants aren't interested in education, and that statement never sat comfortably with me. I began to ask myself, where was the young person's voice in that narrative, and who had been spoken to involve that narrative? So I carried out my own research across post-primary schools in East Belfast, where I surveyed 546 pupils, young people aged 11 to 18, who lived in postcode areas BT 4, 5, 6 and 16, asking about their career aspirations and what they saw as any barriers to further or higher education. Those results were revealing. The youngest pupils dreamed of being teachers, vets and soldiers, full of ambition, but by approximately year 10, their comments had begun to change, and they said things like, I don't see anybody like me that goes to university. I would go if my friends go, or people like me don't go to university, we just get jobs. And that was a real turning point for me personally. I realised that it wasn't disinterest in education, it was disconnection, and that the services there just weren't matching where the community was. So Phoenix Education Centre was founded to bridge that gap, to create a place where learning feels relevant, relational and possible again. If you could move on to the next slide, please. And the next slide again. Thank you. So Phoenix Education Centre is an OCN accredited community learning hub in East Belfast. Hopefully everybody around the table is familiar with OCNs, but if not, we can chat about that afterwards. So we run multiple programmes throughout the week, and we are actually bursting at the seams. Some of the members here have been out to visit us, and we gratefully appreciate that, but we're now bursting at the seams in our building. We have 2 daytime programmes. Phoenix Pathways is 12 to 18-year-olds for per attendance, so where attendance is less than 50% at school, some of them have actually completely disenrolled from school. And then Step Up for Change is 16 to 24-year-olds, and that's where the 2 participants are with me from today. But our work goes beyond school hours. In the evenings, we work with groups of disengaged young men in East Belfast, and some of the committee will be knowledgeable about that. We also run 2 Phoenix Junior Nights for P6 and P7s to help with transitions from moving from junior schools into high school. Our weekly sign language classes also bring together young people and adults from across the community, and that's a level 1 sign language course that will factor into a level 2. And our monthly book club encourages reading for pleasure as well as connection, and to be honest, the first 10 minutes is about the book and the rest is probably more about a wee bit of natter. Across all our programmes, 93% of our learners would be entitled to free school meals. I don't need to explain to anybody around the table what that means and what that looks like. So our learners face complex barriers. We take a holistic approach. We provide counselling, food bank referrals and access to our pre-loved uniform shop, sometimes even essentials like socks, trainers. Every learner receives a meal every day when they're there, free of charge to their family. So at Phoenix Education Centre, education and well-being go hand in hand. Next slide, please. Our education model combines accredited learning, mentoring and personal development. We deliver a wide range of OCN accredited qualifications: literacy, numeracy, mental health and well-being, employability skills, leadership, personal development, amongst others. If you want to go onto the website, you can see them all. But the real difference lies in how we educate. Our staff are facilitators, youth workers and mentors, people who build the relationships first, followed by the education. We partner closely with local schools, youth organisations, councils and community organisations to ensure that our work complements the wider education system and not competes with it. I fully recognise the pressures faced by school principals and the enormous tasks and challenges that they face, but unlike schools, Phoenix must secure its funding from scratch every single year, including the reports that come with that. So while a principal manages the school and its operations, amongst many other things, I also carry the responsibility for writing every funding application that keeps these programmes alive, as well as the evaluation that goes alongside that, and I'm sure many of you will have seen those at work. Next slide, please. So just to talk a little bit about the challenges that we face. So despite our outcomes, the system isn't built to support centres like Phoenix Education Centre. At present, funding follows the school and not the learner. Post-primary schools receive somewhere in the region typically of 4,800 to 5,000 per pupil, depending on free school meal entitlement and numerous other, again, I don't need to preach to the choir here. If funding were to follow the learner, Phoenix would have the stability to plan long term and reach more young people. Instead, we operate on short-term project grants, consistently fundraising to keep services running, even though our learners have the highest levels of need. We have to look and see what other funding, revenue generating things that we can go into. So that's where we're a social enterprise. To put it in some context for you, and that's where this graph is. And this information is taken from the Department of Education statistics. So on average, the free school meal entitlement is across Northern Ireland is 28%. For non-grammar secondary schools, that's 32%. For disadvantaged schools, some of you will be familiar with in your constituencies, that can range anywhere from 50 to 60%. So Phoenix Education Centre and the young people that we're supporting, we're 93%. So you can imagine. That figure alone tells you everything about the community that we serve. Next slide, please. So now that I've given you a little bit of information, a little bit of background, what I'd like to bring you to today are our two asks. So they would not be simple, but they would be transformative. So allow the funding to follow the learner to ensure parity between mainstream schools and community-based education providers. Let the resources travel with the young person to wherever they can best learn and succeed. And recognise community-based education as a formal part of our education ecosystem. Centres like Phoenix Education Centre should not be seen as a last resort. They're an essential part of how Northern Ireland educates its young people, involve us in planning, in policy and in funding frameworks. Of course, if funding is to follow the learner, there must also be safeguards in place, and we fully recognise that. We're not suggesting that any organisation could simply set up and draw down funding. Quality must come first. This approach should apply to only accredited and quality assured community education providers who would meet any agreed standards in governance, safeguarding and learner outcomes. For example, Phoenix Education Centre, as I explained, is an OCN accredited centre. We're externally verified, subject to moderation, quality assurance and financial oversights, as we're also a charity. A fair model would mirror safeguards across the sector, ensuring that only approved accredited centres can access learner-linked funding. In short, the goal is not to loosen any standards, but to extend accountability and opportunity equitably, recognising that high quality education also happens in community settings. We're not asking for special treatment, we're asking for equity and recognition. The two young people beside me today are proof of what happens when education is delivered differently, when it's relational, local and responsive. They show what is possible when young people are given the chance to be seen, to be heard and to be believed in. So Chair, I'd like to just close off by saying thank you very much for the opportunity to present today. Phoenix Education Centre exists because young people in East Belfast have told us they didn't see anybody like them in education, and our mission is to change that, one learner, one family and one community at a time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma. Look, I'll start with some questions. If I could just ask members then just to indicate through the clerk, and we'll run through the evidence session from there. First of all, I just want to thank Malaki and Victoria for attending today. It takes a lot of courage to put yourself into this position and to share some of your experiences, so we really do appreciate it. I just have a couple of questions for Emma first, and then I might move on from there. Could you just help me to understand, just so we're clear on sort of what we're speaking about right from the outset, in terms of the spectrum of provision that most people would see would probably be school, then through to maybe education other than at school settings, EOTA settings, and then maybe youth work settings sitting outside that. Mm-hmm. Where would Phoenix or that community-based model sort of sit in that picture? If that makes sense.
Yeah, so we're quite unique in terms of the different models because we're straddling. We were set up during COVID, and so nobody wanted to fund any new organisations. I visited other organisations such as New Start Education in West Belfast, Conway Mill, and looked to see what was best practice and what was really going on. We would really see ourselves as utilising community principles and youth work principles in education, because for me, young people have to get something of value out of the education. And what that looks like is typically their qualifications, because we need next steps to be possible. So next steps, exit pathways out of Phoenix, is typically either going into employment or further education college. So essentially they shouldn't be finishing out. So in the Step Up for Change programme, they will have completed 7 OCN qualifications ranging from level 1 to level 2, as well as essential skills, literacy and numeracy. Some of the cohort on that didn't complete school, some didn't attend back to school from COVID, and so they had no qualifications. So that demographic of learner would have just been left with no access into higher or further education, because they weren't ready to take that step into colleges. Further educational colleges in Northern Ireland are some of the best anywhere. The problem is they're huge in places, and our young people in East Belfast didn't feel comfortable enough to take that step over the building, and that's a big issue.
No, that's great, and that's helpful, because again, I think you are, you're not part of the mainstream provision, so it's helpful to understand where you sit on that. The other question I would just ask, just to sort of for clarification, is then, and again, whoever on the panel is best is to take this question: how does a young person access your service? So what's the pathway, what's the route into getting access to a setting such as yours?
We get referrals in through different pathways. That could be from school, that could be from social services or youth justice advocates. It really just depends on the young person. So when we initially started up, we've also had referrals from Department for Economy's Careers Department. So we do very much see, especially in East Belfast, see ourselves as that ecosystem there. So if it's not something that we can support with, we will signpost into whatever other relevant services are there. But we'll work in partnership with other organisations to take on board referrals if it's appropriate. So depending on the young person's age, will be a depending factor on what programme they could go on. So essential skills, because of the rules and regulations from the college, they can't be under 16 for that particular.
Oh, no, that's helpful. So I suppose the question I have, and it's probably for the two young people on the panel then, what can you tell the committee about your experience at Phoenix in terms of what difference it made for you?
Well, before I got into Phoenix, school I had left just as COVID had hit. Wasn't working out. Then I tried to go into tech, and it was just exactly the same. There was nothing for it. It just didn't work. And then as soon as I get into Phoenix, I have now got pretty much near enough got my Maths in English. I've completed more courses than what I ever would have thought I could even do, and I've actually got into doing what I want to do as a full life career, and I'm already up into my level 2 in it. So yeah, they are very, 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 very helpful, like with young people in today's society.
It's been an experience that has opened doors for you.
Yeah.
We sometimes hear about young people feeling that our system, our qualification system, closes doors, but it opened doors for you?
Big time.
Yeah.
So Victoria's training to be a youth worker.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well done. Have you anything to add at all?
Not
Malaki?
easy. Malaki might not want to speak.
No, that's okay.
If you don't want to. You happy?
Yeah. I left school with nothing. Went to tech. I got removed from tech. I tried to get into a new one.
Oh yeah.
And my Maths in English was poor, very poor. And then I went to a shop. That's when I found Emma. Well, a mum says that her kid was also going to Phoenix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he had poor Maths in English, so obviously I just signed up to them, and now I'm improving in Maths in English.
Yeah.
That's it.
And I think that goes to show the importance of when you're embedded in the community, because it quite often is word of mouth. So, and I remember one of the mums was coming out of the centre, and your mum was it was like, well, what's going on in there? And then they had a wee conversation, and then the busker and I went out and had a word. It just all is word of mouth. So it's grown very organically, and then once the different other statutory like schools and social services became more familiar with us, and more referrals then started coming in. But we are kind of at capacity at the moment within their building.
We'll maybe come to sort of what you need sort of system-wide to embed your model and to give you, maybe make you a bit more sustainable. It's quite timely in the briefing we had. We had an informal briefing yesterday from the Open University and some of their partners in the youth sector who'd worked on the Y Riot
Familiar
model.
with it, yeah.
And one of the things that I took from that session yesterday was that for some young people who may be at the edge of education and possibly already engaged in the criminal and justice system, and in some cases, the things they were emphasising were really time. There are no quick fixes. You have to be prepared to put time in, build relationship, and that it's not like a 6-week programme is not the solution. You need to be that embedded presence in a community that can put the time and relationship in. So it's very much in keeping with what we were hearing yesterday, and it's I think it was something that we were all struck by in that evidence
And
session.
those disengaged groups that I'm working with in the community, I've been working with one of them for 3 years, and it's only to that point where now you're that anything goes to like phone Emma. So it does take time, especially when you're working with people who have maybe felt left behind, or that something hasn't worked for them, or they're disengaged. And it is, we're not school and we're not teachers, so sometimes it's even that disarming them from there. It takes that barrier away.
Look, I'll open up to other members, and maybe the other members may want to explore a little bit more about just some of maybe the system challenges and issues, funding issues you might be experiencing. So I'll hand over to the Deputy Chair, and then I've got some indications from other members here.
Okay, thank you. I suppose I just wanted to ask you, Emma, about what's different from, say, for example, an IOTA setting or even school. What is the real difference within Phoenix that allows children to come, young people to come and flourish within that setting where they don't in other settings?
I think just to be clear, we're not at schools. Schools are doing a great job for most young people. It's just for some young people it doesn't work. And what we find is the vast majority of our demographic have neurodiverse or complex needs. So sometimes what that looks like is not being able to sit in class for the hour. They need a breakout space, or they need to leave to go and do something. We're quite hands-on, so it's not sitting in school different, just sitting hearing from the teacher. It's very engaged. So they've been to MMA, they've done cooking, made Christmas chips
Loads
for
of
kids.
life skills that you wouldn't learn in school.
So I think it would be, we do voluntary participation, so we're not compulsory the way school would be compulsory, and sometimes whenever you flip that narrative to young people, it's their choice if they want to come. So that puts the onus on us as providers to make sure that the young people coming to us feel safe, feel comfortable, that we're giving them value in what we're providing for them, because if we weren't doing that, they wouldn't show up. They'd rather sit at home and play their Xboxes or their PlayStations.
And in terms of the courses that you're offering, what is available? I know you've mentioned that you do catch up with numeracy and literacy for young people who need that support, but what else is on offer?
So we're an accredited OCN centre, so we run various different OCNs, and that ranges through good relations, personal success and well-being, vocational skills. We've about 20 odd that's on the list, and you can see that on OCNNI's website. They are level 1 and level 2. So we also look at essential skills, that's level 1 and level 2 as well. I'm sure you're familiar with the structure and the framework around that. We have sign language at the moment as well. Our younger programme that only started this term, in January when their new semester starts, they'll be doing math, English, history, cooking, personal success, well-being and PE. So they're in a structured from 10 till 3 Monday to Thursday. They're not in on a Friday because the youth worker then has their one-to-ones with them on a Friday. We also offer, if the young person feels that they need it, further professionally trained or counselling sessions. But sometimes it's just a chat with the youth workers that they need. It's not actually counselling that they need. And then they've been doing trips and different things as well. So it is very much on the youth work principles. I'm not a qualified youth worker, but it is very much community and youth work principles that we utilise within the centre, and the staff that we have are trained youth workers.
And in terms of a pathway, whether it's into the workforce or on to say further or higher education, how does that work?
So depending on what the course is, say for example it's at Belfast Met or one of the other colleges, we'll look and see what the admissions criteria is and make sure that the young person's hitting that admissions criteria. So for example, we had a young person interested in car mechanics, so he really needed to get his essential skills, English, math, and then he had to develop a folder of personal reflection. He was going through the juvenile justice system as well, so he had to put a bit more work into explaining how he was turning his life around, things like that, before the college would look to accept him. So it's really about understanding what does the young person want to do right now. And lots of young people don't know, because I don't know about you guys, but I didn't know what I wanted to do till I was in my 30s. So sometimes young people don't know, but it's given them the widest possible access. So looking at jobs right now, you can't get a job unless you have your English and math grade C. That's what you need.
And you have to have experience in it too.
And so many young people are leaving school with no GCSE in English and math and no essential skills in math and English, which then makes them, they're funneled into then low paid, low income jobs. And I'm not going to start and go off into how that impacts into criminality and justice and community. We're still trauma informed community. We're still living with the legacy of the Troubles. So there's all of those things that go in, especially in working class communities. Education is where our young people need to be able to access resources so that they can have choices that go into what it is that they want to do.
Yeah. And I want to sort of ask you a more general question, Emma, about underachievement. And I know that it has been flagged up previously that there's a high level of underachievement among Protestant working class boys, but it also exists among Catholic boys too.
Yep.
And I think from what I have researched anyway, the primary indicator of underachievement is poverty and the socioeconomic background of young people. And I'm just wondering, in terms of some of the changes the minister is making now, for example, changes to the curriculum and assessment, and he's going to do away with the AS levels, coursework, and everything's going to be based on, one high stakes exam at the end of 2 years of study at A level. What would your view be on that?
I could just ask just briefly on that, but
Yep.
to answer the question.
So, I would be more in line with coursework as opposed to exams. I think we've seen from the 11 plus and the legacy of CAG and all of the different things, the impact that a one course or one exam can impact for people in their lives. I don't want to get drawn into a politically charged conversation around exams, but we can have that possibly at another time. But I don't believe in exams. I don't think it shows how a young person can achieve. We don't go into a job and be sat down with an exam paper and said, write me 2 hours what you know about this topic. So a lot of universities are moving away from exams for undergrad students. So why do we still ask 11 or 16-year-olds to do exams?
Thanks for that. Thank you.
So David, you'd indicated next.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks very much for your presentation so far. I am familiar and I've visited Phoenix, and they do excellent work, and so I want to thank you for that in East Belfast and recognise that. My first question, if Emma doesn't mind, is probably going to be to the two with her, and I guess and some of this will touch on things that have already been discussed, but what was it? You both have spoken, I think, of having difficulties at school or and feeling maybe disengaged from that or disconnected from that, as Emma put it earlier. What was it about Phoenix in particular that made you feel more able or more willing to connect with
for a
Phoenix?
start, in my experience, I was told I was going to go nowhere. I wasn't going to succeed in life, and from I've came to Phoenix, my two support workers and Emma herself has helped me unreal amounts. Like, I mean, from boosting my own confidence till making me realise my own self-worth and how much I can actually do. It's not holding me back that I thought it would be. So it is, and they're just like, you can just go to them and talk about what you need to talk about, and they're going to be there, not look at you as if you're lower than them or like that, if you get me.
Yeah. Oh, do you want the answer? You don't have to, but it's
With English is a big problem with me, and Emma has got me was it a pen?
C pen, yeah.
A C pen, which helps me read, and from there I've been going on like.
very good, yeah.
I think it would be fair to say we're in the second year of the programme with these two participants. So we had the RISE Summit last year, and a couple of the participants were like, we want to be on the stage there next year, we want to be able to talk there, so
Yeah.
building their confidence comes first.
I guess it's again, it's coming off. We were quite enthused, I think, by the discussion we had with the Y Riot participants, or those who run the programme yesterday. I know you talked to you beforehand. You had run part of that programme and so on.
Well,
What
no,
I-
I haven't run
Sorry?
the programme. They facilitated me with the information so that we could run it in-house.
Sorry,
Yeah,
sorry if
that's
I'm
okay.
picking it up wrong.
Yeah.
But I guess what I wanted to focus on was, how do you find it from Emma, and that coming out of the question that I asked before, that someone from the community, being in the community, can gain that trust over time? Because trust was a big theme of the discussions yesterday. Build that trust in a way that people who've been through school and they've had negative experiences, and therefore those in suits and ties and teachers and other authority figures in those kind of institutions are not people that they feel trusting of, because they feel that they've been burned before. Yeah. How important, or how does it help you to deliver these services to be someone that they recognise within the community and helping the community?
I think I've lived and worked in East Belfast my whole life. I'm covered in tattoos, so the first thing that when you go in is young people are like, oh, what's that? So you're automatically sort of saying to them, like, I am one of you, like, I live around the corner. Don't get me wrong, I went into another area one time and I had a bow in my hair, and the wee fella was 15 and he says, who do you think you are with the bow in your hair? And I was like, oh, okay. But within East Belfast, obviously, I see people at different hours. You see them at the shops, you see people, their families, their parents, their grandparents in some cases. And it does really help to have those relationships, because I think it helps you. And I'm not saying that, other people don't care or anything like that, but when you understand the context, when you understand where people are coming from, when you understand and you have lived experience of being in the area. Like, I grew up at the interface down at Castlereagh Street, so that's where I grew up during the latter part of the 80s, so I know what was going on. You can't really replicate that in somebody else coming in, because they can be compassionate and they can be empathetic and they can be all of those things, but the lived experience component of that, I think that really helps to relate to people, because they think, well, Emma's one of us, she grew up around the corner. And what I would really like people to see from that is, I left school at 16 and had a baby. My teachers told me I was never going to amount to anything, and I would like young people to then go, well, listen, if Emma did it, I could do it. They
can relate to it and not feel judged, I guess, in that sense.
Yeah.
Just one more about time.
Just briefly, yeah.
Yeah, and it's the school avoidance piece, and I think it's a big issue for us all. And some schools try their best to assist and do what they can, and sometimes we have to look at other options. How do you find schools? And I'm specifically not asking you to name any schools in terms of good or bad. Yep. But how in general do you think schools are dealing with that? Do you find most trying their best to help the pupils? Are they engaging with you and other services to try and find a fit that does work with the pupils? How are you finding that?
Some schools
try and answer briefly if we can.
Some schools are going over and above. Some schools are definitely going over and above and tying in with us. There is difficulty around some of the framework that comes through EA when they're being told that they can't work in partnership with us, that a young person has to be disenrolled from school before they. So what we had looked at trying to do was work in partnership with the school, especially at 12, 13, to signpost back into school, because our role is not to compete with the school, our role is to complement. But in some cases, the schools are being given advice where the young person has to be actually disenrolled. And I think that is something that we could look at in terms of policy, because why should a young person be disenrolled? If they're not attending school, let's help signpost them back in, but utilise services like ourselves.
Self-defeating. Well, thank you very much, and thanks to you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
And there may well be actions we can pick up at the end of the session. Gary, you had indicated.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you all for coming in today. Really valued your presentation, and actually Emma just really ties into what you just said about complementing rather than competing with mainstream education. And I have personal experience of a situation where a young person has been, if you like, disenrolled, struck off, and has found it very difficult to get back in to that education because they're below 16 and they can't get into the tech, and there's limited services, certainly in my constituency. In terms of one of your recommendations, or one of your in your presentation there was around funding following the learner. So it may be a bit of an obvious answer, but obviously you're working on short-term grants at this minute in time. How much of a difference would it make if that was the case, and what more could you do, for the young people that come through your organisation?
For easy math, let's say every young person participant was £5,000. Okay, so we have 2 different programmes and they're capped at 15 because that's the ratio that we work on. So if we look at that across a year, that's roughly £150,000 that I would then not have to go and continuously find every single year. That would enable us to then plan strategically longer term. That would enable us to invest. That would enable us to then actually gain a bigger premises, because right now we only have 2 classrooms in our current setup. So being able to have the sustainability of funding. Now, we're also a social enterprise. We sell our own clothing, we deliver training, we try and juggle a lot of different hats to bring that revenue in. But if we were able to secure sustainable funding, that would be absolutely game changing for organisations like ourselves.
Well, that's useful. And another question, obviously, for me, there's certainly a place for exams, but that shouldn't be the sole. I think that there's certainly other pathways that young people can achieve, and it's not solely just an academic route. There's other, I suppose we need to build confidence and resilience, and it's clear with Malaki and Victoria that that's something which they very much value and receive from Phoenix. How do you measure that? How do you measure that? How does the young people, how do you measure sort of outside of the academic attainment piece? How do you measure the confidence, resilience?
Along as a piece of string. So we have our own in-house systems looking again at youth work principles and how, so we do a lot of pre and post survey questionnaires. We have our own in-house CRM systems. But really it's the individual qualitative stories that young people share with us in terms of, I now feel able to get the bus by myself. So the same journey is not there for everybody, because whilst the school system is great in places for a certain type of young people, some people need a wee bit more of a holistic wraparound approach. And that might be help to figure the bus out, help to gain a bit of confidence to go and speak to people. But it is then, how do we look at that? So if we're not looking at accredited qualifications, the OCN is not an exam. So you do your workbook as you go along, but you're still having to pass it. You're still having, so we're moderated. They still have to hit the certain criteria for it to be qualified, or for it to be accredited, sorry. So we're not just saying, there shouldn't be any sort of qualifications, because that, at the right now, that's what universities use, but we're going to try and make community sector accessible so that we can then signpost them into next steps.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. Donna, you were next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for listening to the story and the journey, because even think I grew up in Trimrock, free school meals. I failed, but it was 1982, so it was 11 plus then, so I failed my 11 plus. That failure stuck with me for a very, very long time, and it was actually probably a wee bit of luck that I got some of my GCSEs, and then running the summer where I ended up picking up a book and reading a book and loved it, and for some reason got confidence and went on to do A levels, and get to sit here today, and a very privileged job. So well done, and all you can achieve anything, honestly, what you put around it, because too many people will write you off. I suppose my question will be, are you concerned that really there hasn't been any real massive changes in the system? When, I can go back to 1992 when I went into my secondary school. There was boys and girls there who had additional needs that were just never diagnosed, and they would have been put into in class, but we were even wrote off as well, you're never going to end up at university or anything like that. I don't think too much has changed, and in fact I'm really concerned that even removing coursework now in AS, I will even close even more doors. And referrals to the EOTA centres, that was announced last week, that's going to cost more money in the long run. So Emma, what could you say to that there? Where we're at right now, we haven't moved too far, in my opinion. What needs to be done?
I don't think we've moved very far. We still have the same issues we had in the 80s and 90s, and we're still teaching the same curriculum. Obviously the curriculum review is ongoing at the moment. What I would say is we kids only spend 13 to 15% of their time in school. So a large part of it is the responsibility of the community setting and others, like youth work, to make sure that a young person has access to opportunities. We should be funding these sectors appropriately. The youth sector, and had been decimated over the last few years in terms of full-time youth provision in areas, especially in areas of high deprivation and need. If we look at youth centres, they also punch way above their weight. They're giving young people breakfast, after-school meals, after-school activities, after-school homework help. I guess when we're looking at, I think we need schools to be not as focused on exams. We still need to be able to manage, make sure people are learning. But the other thing is, I think we need to look at teacher training and what teacher training in the colleges looks like, and what how we teach trainers to train teachers not only teach in grammar schools, but to also teach in other providers and secondary schools where they're going to see people that didn't have the same upbringing as them.
And I know I'm not trying to drag you into the political side of this here, but I guess for me that one exam at 11 years of age warps our whole system, and where everything else goes from it. I can even, like, you think of even the uniform that we have to, like, kids have to go out in now, the blazer and all that there. It's almost like if you dress properly, you will and somehow become more successful as well. I think a lot of that stems exactly from that one exam.
We've talked to young people who've said, and my generation, we did the 11 plus. Some of my classmates passed and some didn't, and they would go on and say, I did not pass my 11 plus. I went to a school where teachers didn't really care. They threw dusters at us. Now, obviously, that's not today. That was back then, just to be clear. So there is changes that need to happen still. I think if we want to look at what is the education system set out to do, and that's my question to you. What is the education system set out to do? Because whatever it's set out to do, then we need to make sure that it can do that and is accessible to do that. Uniform policy is a whole other different things, and there's pros and cons. I know schools in America that traditionally don't wear school uniforms, but then there's issues in terms of what they can wear, and sometimes that's policing what girls wear. Girls should not be policed for what they wear. If they decide to wear a vest top to school, that should be fine. But I'll not digress into that. So there is a place for uniforms in some shape or form, because parents have said they'd prefer to not have to worry about what they're going to put their kids in every day. But show me a job where you have a work uniform, council and some other blue collar, but show me a job that you have a work uniform. Whenever I was going to school and whenever I went into work, you weren't allowed to have coloured hair, you weren't allowed to have face piercings, you weren't allowed to have tattoos. Society has changed and society has evolved. Schools need to do the same.
Yeah, and just one last point, it's like pastoral care. Are young people getting enough of that? Did you get enough of that support even in your school setting?
No, and that's just me being honest. They didn't care. They only cared about their paycheck. So they did. That's the only way to put it. There's no beating around the bush about it.
I know there is some schools that do very fantastic work with their pastoral care units and different swim units and things like that, but some of the young people that come to us have not had that same experience.
Thank you.
Danny, Michelle, you'd indicated next.
Thanks. Folks, thanks for coming. It's been really, really helpful to listen to you. I was going to start with Malaki and Victoria, if that's okay, and answer if you want. I just wanted to understand why you feel school as an institution you feel like doesn't work for you. So did you feel this way about school in primary school as well, or is it just when you got to post-primary school?
Well, I got bullied a bit in primary school as well, but it didn't really faze me as much then. And then whenever I went to high school I was bullied, and then the teachers, they just weren't nice at all. The whole thing with exams, as Susan's brought just talking about, I couldn't do them either, so I didn't have a single qualification till my name whenever I eventually left school. And then it was the same in tech. They just didn't care. Like, if you went to anything and said anything to them, they just pushed you under the blanket, and it was like, well, we'll sort it out tomorrow, but it never got sorted. So it wasn't. So it was like, but what's the point in you saying anything? What's the point in young people actually trying to help themselves if you're not getting anything in return?
And I think schools, obviously, some schools are 700, 800, 900 pupils. We're a lot smaller setting. I think that does impact on our ability. Teachers will go out of their way in some cases, but they may not be able to do certain things, whereas in our setting, you know, some of our youth workers have went out and did weekend interventions where young people have had mental health crises, and our youth workers have took them out for a walk at the weekend. And as schools can go over and above their weight, but they don't offer that. And so I think, you know, it's just about we're embedded in the community, we're accessible, they can lift the phone and tell us if they need something.
Do you think that embedded in the community, those smaller sizes, that tailored approach is the bit that is the real difference, as opposed to if you look at a school day being quite structured? I don't know if you have a typical day in Phoenix, but obviously in a school you have a very typical day, and it's any school you could walk into would look very similar. Is yours very different from that? Is it much more tailored to individuals? Is there?
Well, it is much more driven by what's their interest. So we're very much, when we're planning, sit down, what do they want to do? So that's how we've done the MMA sessions. That's how we've done, what do we do, paintballing, or what do we do? Airsoft. That was painful. So we went and done things, but it is about co-designing the process. And you know, like I said, we're not pushing back against schools. We're here to complement rather than compete. But
we're also not a jail.
We're not
a jail.
So, for example,
breathe.
Yeah. So if we have a breakout space, and sometimes if they're overwhelmed, they can go out and sit in the breakout space. Whereas I know before, some of them haven't been allowed to leave class to go to the bathroom. That's a big challenge, you know, sometimes, especially when you have a young person with sensory issues or neurodiverse or other issues. It's, you know, school is quite structured.
In terms of, there's a lot going on at the minute with a curriculum. Mm-hmm. So from your experience, what do you think in terms of the curriculum would need to change right now to better cater?
So we actually fed into the curriculum review piece and had the researchers out. So some of our statements would be in that piece of research. So there's two things. So are we only educating young people so that they can get a job, or should we also actually really enjoy education and do what it is that we really want to do? But if we're looking at jobs and if we're focused on jobs, some of the work that we're doing actually would be preventative NEETs programs. So I'm sure you're familiar with the acronym, whether we agree or disagree with the acronym, and as it's outlined, that is what statistics are talked about at the moment. But the work that we're doing is a preventative NEETs program, which not only then saves money from Department for Communities and Department for Economy and the likes of the apprenticeships, traineeships, all of those other programs. But let's then look at that earlier in the process, and let's stop young people from feeling that they're no longer embedded in the system, and let's support them from where we can.
Thank you, Michelle. Cara, you'd indicated next.
Thank you so much, Chair. Emma, I just want to say I've enjoyed every minute of this today. I think you're really inspiring, and the young people beside you are so inspiring, and taking something from your youth and building what you have is just incredible. On the topic of emotional based school avoidance, in my constituency, I cover Coleraine, and there's also a high amount of working class Protestant boys who are not attending school. And when speaking with their parents, one of the main things that came up was when a child has been out of school for a long amount of time, say they do still want to sit exams, what they have found is if a school doesn't want to work with them, there's only 2 schools in Northern Ireland that offer opportunities to book a slot to come and sit an exam, and that's at a personal cost. Is that something you've come across in the children that you've worked with the young people, that maybe they do want to go and sit an exam, but they're not getting that pathway or that access back into education?
So 2 points. We don't go to the GCSE curriculum because our young people have typically had too much learning loss to recoup that. Could we access that? No, we haven't been able to in the past. But what we're trying to do is make sure that, say for example, somebody doesn't attend school in 2nd year, 3rd year, 4th year maybe even, that their knowledge is still up to date with the curriculum, that they can then go back to school in 5th year and sit the GCSEs if they haven't fallen too far behind. The problem is, once we start to see that school avoidance, whether it's emotionally based or whatever the challenges are, once they start to fall behind, then that's compounded further by further absences. So if some of the young people that we're looking at now, they're 13 and 14, we're going back to Key Stage 1 for their math and English. So that should demonstrate how far behind they are in terms of their peers. So then what happens is when they get to first or second year and math is a language, languages is languages. When you go to high school and you've got all these other subjects, you're already feeling overwhelmed by what you have missed out on. We don't have those foundational blocks. How can young people feel that they can succeed? So I do think there is a bit of work around that as well.
That's really well articulated, just some of the obstacles. Thank you so much. Just one more question for yourself and then one quick one with our young people. This is an incredible model. You've touched on challenges with deprivation, being trauma informed. Is there anything similar to Phoenix Education anywhere else in Northern Ireland?
There is a few places, yeah, and that really I went and visited them to look at best practice models. I'm not sure how they would feel about me saying their names, but so I did go over and speak with Mary at New Start Education. I've been over at Conway Mill. I have been at Macrofelt in Mid-Ulster, down at Mega speaking with them. So there are different models in different places, but there's no one set one for one community, because when you're doing something that is a community-based approach, it depends on your community and it depends on your relationships within the community. So it's not really a one size fits all, but there are issues that we share in common, especially around deprivation.
Totally. I really like your community approach, the fact that, finding out in the local shop. I think that's absolutely brilliant. And then this is for the young people. Thank you so much for being here. As a committee, we always learn best when we learn directly from yourselves. Just a really simple question. All I need is a sentence or two. You're very capable, bright young people. And what is your favourite thing about Phoenix Education?
The staff in it and the support you get from them.
Brilliant. And yourself?
Mine is, obviously you can see me here fidgeting. They wouldn't shout at me for it.
So it's simple things like that.
It's wee small things that matter.
And I think it's important as well for schools to be you touched on there, Emma, about being ADHD aware, autism aware, and the importance of that, and allowing children to fidget and fidget spinners and all these small things that can really help improve their learning and just allowing them to be themselves. So folks, that's it from me. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I've loads of notes here. I've really learned a lot this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Cara. And then we had an indication from John.
Yeah, thanks. that was excellent. I'm a little bit croaky today. I haven't been feeling great, so you'll be glad I am remote. I'm particularly interested. It's an issue I've been asking about, is the lack of male teachers, and I wanted to get an insight from you about challenges around young men, boys in the education setting. We do have underattainment, do have issues with attendance, a bit motivation. How do we get more males into the teaching profession? They're grossly underrepresented, in order to have those positive role models for young boys in education.
I'm not really sure I'm best placed to answer that in terms of how we recruit more male teachers. What I will say is our relationship approach is very different, because we're not teachers. So when we're speaking to them, we don't speak to them as teachers. We'll maybe sit and play the PlayStation. It's not me personally, one of the youth workers, because I can't play the PlayStation. But one of our youth workers will maybe sit and play. So it is just a very different approach, and I think that's where you need to look at the the training colleges within Northern Ireland who are training the teachers, and they need to understand the ERIS provision, and they need to understand the demographics of the young person. In my experience, teachers are still quite there's still a class element within teaching that maybe the teachers don't relate with the young people that they're working with.
Yeah, and I suppose just a second question, and some of the other colleagues have touched upon it. See the fall in attendance levels since COVID. I mean, you just reiterate any other practical steps you think that would help boost that attendance rate?
So some schools are doing fantastic work in terms of SPIM units. I think you should all be familiar with the SPIM. So some of it's great, but why do we have to have that limited to only some classes? my personal belief is young people, regardless of their ability, should be able to access the same opportunities. I don't believe in segregating our young people in schools, whether by academic ability, religion, or neurodiversity ability. They need to have access to the same resources and opportunities within the schools. But it is about making sure that the classroom is a comfortable environment. So as adults, do you all have your aerodynamic chairs that you're sitting on? Kids in classrooms don't have that. But yet we expect them to sit in school 6 hours, moving from, so I think we need to relook at how the system and those systemic issues are, sitting on a hard plastic seat. Now I know they're not all going to be hard plastic seats, but across the schools, if you're sitting on an uncomfortable seat, if you're not eating before you go into school, if you're going in on an empty stomach, if your house is covered in mold and damp and you haven't slept, or you're having trauma at home, I don't need to go on about Maslow's need and everything. But basically, a young person's needs need to be met before they walk into the school premise. And if they're not being met at home or in the community, then school is the only other place that they can be met.
Yeah, and I suppose that brings in the school meal increase in price, which I think is deplorable, personally. And I think the fact it's jumped up 20% is a sudden increase, well above inflation. Actually, it would have been better doing it gradually if you were going to do it at all. Over the last number of years, but very hard to budget for. Because
I'm going to go one step further and say you should have free school meals for everybody. Now I know that's going to be controversial in terms of grammar school provision and everything else, but everybody needs to be fed.
100%.
Well, there was a motion yesterday, I think it was, or Monday. We had a motion on that, which passed. So yeah, no, okay, thank you. That was very useful.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, John. Okay, so I think that's... sorry, Kathy.
Yeah, I don't have a question, I just have a comment. I just want to say to both of you guys, you're both class. And Victoria, I hope whoever told you that you're not going to go anywhere is watching you now and can see you here now. And best of luck in your youth work, and Malaki in your maths and English. And Emma, fair play to you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Thank you, Kathy. And I think Kathy probably speaks for everybody there with those comments. That's it's been great to hear from both of you, and obviously yourself, Emma, today. Look, we will discuss sort of outworkings of this evidence session, and look, we haven't in great detail at committee got into the issue of attendance. It has come up in various settings and different evidence sessions, but this is the first sort of session we've really looked at the impact of attendance around educational achievement and what are the real community level interventions that can be looked at to do something about that and put provision in place that really works for young people. So look, it's been really helpful. If I could maybe finish with one last question. You did sort of reference about funding and the need for funding to follow the pupils, so that if they're accessing your service that you're resourced to actually make the provision. If you had sort of one overarching ask about how the system could work in partnership with you, what would that look like in terms of how you could operate so that it was more streamlined, that you got the support you needed?
Well, it is allowing the funding to follow the learner, because that allows us to strategically plan. We do need a bigger building. That's obviously capital and a whole other complex questions. But what we get out of actually having our own independency and autonomy is that we actually don't have the same friction on us that the schools have. We're able to make our own decisions in-house in terms of what subjects the young people, they're able to co-design the programme, and so I wouldn't want us to be governed too much by any governance or bureaucracy coming from government. But in terms of the funding, I think that's one of the biggest policy asks that we could look at. I know, because essentially if, say for example, a young person was 14, the budget is already there for that young person. So we're not asking for money to be grown out of somewhere. The money is already there.
Because we have quite rigid structures that it's whoever's on the school's register in October, that the money stays there. And, and we hear this even with newcomer children, that often, because they weren't in the school at the point of the census, then the school gets no funding to actually support them. So we hear about this in other contexts. Some flexibility so that money can actually land with the setting who's delivering the education would make sense.
It's also allowing schools to work with us and to look at that, because we really want to work with schools where young people aren't attending. If we can then signpost back into school without them having to deregister, if we can support their English and maths specifically, all the other subjects they'll pick up at long GCSEs, and that's a bit different. But our goal is to make sure young people have their English and math. So if we can have that stopgap in place to then signpost them back into school, but unfortunately they're being told that to work with us, the young person needs to be deregistered.
Really that flexibility for schools to work in partnership with you, not in competition but partnership, and it even links in with the likes of the Education Welfare Service, that there'd be an easy pathway to access.
So we're
those
linked in and
services.
get referrals from them.
Yeah. That's great. All been really helpful, and we'll have a discussion around follow up from here. So thank you all
Very much for your time. Thank you.
Really helpful session.
Thank you.
Well done.
All right. Okay, members, so just before we move on to the next item in the agenda, it would be worth just highlighting anything that we do want to take away from that. Just a couple of notes that I've made. Certainly that issue around barriers to working in partnership with schools, and it's not just in relation to Phoenix, but in terms of that community-based model of education for some of those young people who are that bit further removed from the education system. I think it would be worth picking up with the EA if they could provide some clarity around just where the policy sits in terms of just giving that permission for schools to work in partnership with them. I think would be helpful, and maybe at that departmental level, I think the question that's emerged is around what flexibility can be built into the system to allow funding to follow the pupil. So if they're in a setting such as Phoenix or other community setting, that the money would follow them rather than sitting in a school that they might not be attending. So those are the two things for me. Was there anything else arising from that from any other members?
Carrot's on there.
Carrot?
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, I thought that was extremely helpful to see the different avenues that exist out there for those kids that just feel they're being left out due to a number of reasons. Just if there's anything that I suppose we could put to the department about, it was something that had come up before multiple times, is the pathways back into education. So if a child has been out for long periods of time and they do want to sit their exams, it's my understanding it's costly and it's really challenging to book an exam. So I don't know, is that something we could just put a wee simple question for to the department just to get clarity on what's on offer and how much it costs families or young people?
I'm sure we could build that into the correspondence. I mean, it is connected in terms of those pathways back into education. It's always a challenge when you look at really good community models, and we got this a little bit with Why Riot yesterday, and I was straight in with sort of, well, how can we mainstream this everywhere? And they were like, well, these things kind of grow organically in communities. So departments don't always like things that grow organically, but I think when something's working, it's looking to see how we can support and facilitate. So look, I think that was a really helpful session. David?
I know, I think that's actually the pathways in, the obstacles, I think that's something that's probably worth at some stage, and we're pressed for time, a session to discuss specifically. And I know I'll not jump the gun, but I know it's something off the back of the discussions yesterday. We're looking at other options, and maybe it could filter into that as well.
Thinking forward work planning, and we can speak to that later. There is something around. Just certainly we have attendance issues coming up there, so there's maybe space for a bit of work around that. But absolutely, it comes up repeatedly when different topics are raised. But this issue of attendance and disengagement from education comes up.
There shouldn't be those barriers, particularly in the circumstance that we're in. We should be trying to look at innovative ways to get some of those people back into schools again and not put barriers from them.
That's great. Okay, so that brings that item to a close, and we've got some actions arising from that. So before we move into item 8, are we all taking a quick comfort break, and then we'll move back. So if I could say 5 minutes, and then we'll return to just turn the live feed off there. Okay, members, that is us back into open session of the committee, and it moves us on to item 8 on our agenda. And it is a briefing from the EA in relation to the local impact teams. So I'll let the officials get seated. And this is part of our inquiry into SEN provision and transformation. So yeah, I think there should just be the name tags there for you. That's grand. So I'll refer members to a briefing note from the committee clerk at page 152, briefing paper from the EA at page 153, and there is also some material that has been tabled in relation to issues that have been raised by the independent autism reviewer around SEN related issues, and there's an EA response provided there for that. I'm not sure how much of that will factor into this particular evidence session, but it's there for members' reference. That's at page 54 of table papers. So today we welcome back Dr. Tomas Adell, Chief Transformation Officer within the EA. We have Gillian Cuthbert, Interim Assistant Director, SEND Support and Local Impact Teams with the EA, and Ursula Garvey, Assistant Senior Education Officer within the local impact teams in the EA. And again, if I've got any job titles wrong, please do correct me. So you're all very welcome today, as is normal format. Tomas, you'll be getting used to this. You've been here a fair bit over the last while. Hand over to yourselves for an initial presentation of up to 10 minutes, and then we'll move into question and answer, aiming to keep it to around sort of 5 minutes per inquiry for each member so we can get through the evidence. But over to yourselves.
Thank you very much. And again, it's good to be back here. It's I quite enjoy this, so it's good.
That raises a question mark.
It's important to have disagreements because that's the only way we can improve. That's my starting point. And anyway, it's great talk about local impact teams here today. I'm going to call them LITs for just ease. So you received a very comprehensive briefing from us. We don't see any reasons to hold anything back from you. So hopefully we provided everything that would be helpful in there. I'm not going to rehearse what's in that briefing to keep things short. However, there are 3 things I want to highlight. The first is about staff in Education Authority and the staff delivering these services on the ground. So the LIT staff and other support staff. These people are highly skilled and dedicated in improving the outcomes of children and young people with SEN. Every day they go to work with one aim, and that is to help children with SEN. So I want to give them praise and I want to thank them for the good work that they do. They make a difference in children's lives every single day. So with that in mind, I want to urge a bit of caution when we talk about LITs and with the discussion we're going to have today. Quite often we talk about LITs as being bad, or that's what comes out. These staff take that personally. They fight for our children, and I'm sure that's not how it's intended, but that's how it's received. So I want to be really clear that we talk about services, not about the people who work in those services, and how we structures and systems can improve rather than individual people doing bad jobs. And I'm sure you all agree with me on that. I just want to put that on record from our side. I want to recognize that EA has not always got it right. I mean, we're not perfect in any way, shape or form. It is right to criticize what we do as a system, but please make sure that negative criticism comes to EA as an organization system, not against the staff. So 2 things can be said at the right time. On the one hand, SEN provision undoubtedly needs to expand and improve. We know past and present shortcomings have created deep frustration and dissatisfaction among parents in school. We understand that, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that. At the same time, EA and the staff are struggling really hard to make improvements and to do good outcomes for children. This is against a very difficult budgetary background, and the reality many of these improvements cannot be delivered by ourselves. We require support from others, and we cannot do them quickly. It is necessary right for us to be held to account robustly. All I'm saying, the sweeping and simplistic condemnations isn't fair nor accurate. I mean, even we up here, we fight for children every single day. There's much easier jobs I could have than sitting here arguing about changes we need to do in EA. And I'm sure we all agree on that, but it'd be really good if we can bear that in mind as we talk. The second thing I want to highlight are related to LITs themselves. LITs went live on 15th of September. The change represents one of the largest changes in SEN delivery in Northern Ireland in a very, very long time. Services prior to LITs were not designed to allow our great staff to deliver the best outcomes possible. There were 8 siloed services. Children had to be referred within the services, and different services had different paperwork, and 39 different phone numbers. Education psychologists act as an artificial gatekeeper for no really good reason other than that's what we did. Confusion over geographical boundaries and lack of links to health services. There were fragmented and inconsistent support approaches. There was a lack of governance and oversight and no real understanding of the outcomes and what actually works and how we can share the good work to other places. We relied on strict criteria for diagnosis of support. In short, the services did not deliver the best to provide the best outcomes for children and young people. The LITs create a system that wraps around every child and young person. There's an integrated multi-specialist team with a central contact point. We now also have governance arrangements to ensure consistency in service and abilities to show outcomes. So we can show what works so that we can identify how we can improve services. We know LITs aren't perfect. We know that we have no problem accepting that. We're only 2 months in though, and we will continue to improve. As I noted before, I'm more than happy to look at any examples where we're less perfect than we want to be. We want to improve. However, I must note that all of the comments I get from our staff and from Senkos and from parents are positive. And that contradictory messaging is difficult for me to handle because I want to improve, but I can't improve if I don't know where to improve. So my team and I are engaging actively with trade unions. I sent them a letter probably 45 minutes ago now, asking for a large meeting as soon as we can to make sure we deal with all the issues we have, because that's the appropriate mechanism to deal with some of those issues. There's been ongoing trade union engagement for a long time. We want to continue that. The third thing I want to highlight is one of money and the capacity of LITs. The core problem with LITs, or the previous stage 2 services, is actually one of capacity. The numbers of children in stage 2 are increasing, but the amount of children we can see are not increasing because the funding is flat. That means the proportion of children in stage 2 that we can see are essentially reducing, even though the actual capacity is not reducing. That is a challenging context being. And this is due to finances. So my forecast spend on LITs this year is approximately £24 million. It's forecast spend, so dependent on staffing, but that's a rough forecast. My overall forecast for SEN overall is about 691 million. In that, I have about a £73 million deficit. So LITs are hence about 3.5% of my spend. It's really hard to expand that service when I have that deficit. So what I need to do, and the difficult position we're in, is that we know we need to invest in LITs. We know that LITs is the right thing for children. We know that doing service at stage 2 provides a better outcome for children, meaning they don't have to move to stage 3. We therefore need to find ways to readjust how we spend money in terms of what service provide from stage 3 to stage 2, because that provides better outcomes for children. So this is not about cutting somewhere else, it's about making sure we get the best value for money. That's tricky. That's really tricky for us to do, but that's a challenge we're trying to solve. In that, I also want to stress that there's no conflict between us and the department on this issue. The department are fully supportive of what we're doing. Since I started in EA, the engagement I've had with the department have been very constructive, and we're on the same page. We know that we need to shift existing research in stage 2. We know we need to extend stage 2 services to provide support for children when they need it, and where they need it, at the time they need it. The ambition we have at LITS is to provide a child-centered service. We're focused on the outcome of children and young people's son, to facilitate that early intervention and quick access when the child and young person need it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. So I'll start, I think, maybe to address your first point. I think I'm comfortable to speak for committee here. I don't think there has ever been an attempt from committee to try and pinpoint individual staff members within the LITs. We understand, and we know, even looking back to the other roles like SEN link officers, just the level of pressure that staff within EA are facing, and often when we hit crisis points like at placement time, and when we were looking and scrambling for places over summer periods, that it's EA staff are bearing a huge amount of that pressure. So we do understand that, but I think it is absolutely it's welcome to hear you say it, that the committee is absolutely appropriate to be looking at the system level issues and the issues within the EA as an organisation that might be driving some of the problems. So I think that's a good start.
Chair, yes, and say that any criticisms we have made have been at a systemic level. None of our criticisms are directed towards individuals or individual LIT teams or anything like that.
And I can say, I know that there wouldn't have been the intention, but that's how it's been felt by my staff. So that I just want to highlight that it's
to get it on the record. Good to get it on the record, and that's absolutely fine. So I'll make a start with questions, and if I'd ask members then to indicate through the clerk. So what I certainly don't want to do is claim, I don't think any member in this committee would do, so to speak, for all schools or all SENCOs, or to say that every bit of information we get reflects everybody's perspective. But I would say that there's a common theme that certainly comes through, and actually I would start on a positive. There is a broad acceptance that I hear that the new model has a lot of positives. The removal of the EdSpsych gatekeeping rule, the, in theory, single referral point for involvement, maybe come to that, because there is a wee bit of dispute around whether it is single or not, but that, in theory, that dedicated contact person within the LITs. I mean, I've made a few notes of these. A child's needs-led approach rather than a diagnosis-based approach. Lots of positive things come back to me around that, of schools and SENCOs, school leaders feeling that offers a way forward. But I don't think we can ignore the fact that there is right now, and you have referenced this, that there is a lack of confidence. There is a lack of confidence in how it is being rolled out. So the concerns that I would hear would be that LITs feel under-resourced, that they don't feel well enough resourced to deliver what they need to do. You've mentioned flat budget, rising need. That's not a good position to be in. Senkos in particularly not feeling a reduction in workload, in some cases feeling that it's ramping up, that it's driving workload. And I think critically the feeling that the right support doesn't always flow when they're then making those referrals through the RFI, in that sense that sometimes when the support does come through, it feels a bit like we need more evidence, need more time, you need to gather more, we need to work on more plans, when schools feel they've maybe exhausted their options. So that's I think there's a sort of, the two things are a counterpoint to each other. So given that, I think a broad sense that people want this to work, but a sense that there's maybe a lack of confidence in the system as it operates right now. How would you respond to those concerns? And what assurances can you give that over the course of this academic year, because I think it needs to be this academic year if we're going to build confidence, that schools are going to feel that positive change, and that crucially the right support is going to flow to children at the point they need it?
So I will hand over to Gillian in a second, but first I just want to say that the pressures on Senkos in schools, we fully recognise that. I'm not doubting it for a second. The problem with a service that has a limited capacity and the demand is increasing capacity is we cannot provide a service to all the children who need it. That's just a simple math question. It doesn't add up. So therefore Senkos will be frustrated and schools will be frustrated that children they think need a service, meet the threshold of stage 2 service, which is definitely on stage 2, might not receive the support that they think is right, because we have to put essentially barriers or thresholds, whatever language you want to use here, to make sure that only the ones at the top of the band, so to speak, get the service. Because we have limited capacity. If we can see that many children and that many referred in, we can still only see that many children. I don't have the funding to expand that. That's not a quick fix. That takes time to fix, because that means we must reprofile our budgets, must reprofile our spend, which is difficult to do when you have over £70 million deficit.
What is the resource gap then? So both in terms of people and the budget that you need for this to work as you would like to see it working, what's the gap, people and money?
So at the minute, with in relation to the people resource, we have our normal business as usual posts that come throughout the year and fluid that we are making sure that we are appointing. We have an additional 24 posts that have gone into this different service areas, particularly within behaviour and autism, because you'll see that is our greatest need. So it's about making sure the baseline of this is making sure that every single lit team has representation in every single same category area. And we have that majority of cases, but where there's behaviour and autism. So there's 24 additional posts out at the moment that will be recruited. And then we have approximately another 24 posts that we need further alignment to make sure that we have got that same category representation. But I just want to reassure the committee that, yes, we're working within the 28 local impact teams, but obviously there's geographical different variances in relation to referrals. So we are utilising staff across lit teams. There is cross-working and the system does allow us to do that. So we are maximising that. Yes, it's working away from that team around the child, team around the school approach. But the important thing for us is to make sure the support goes to children and young people.
So in terms of people, the gap, there's 24 posts out for recruitment now, but potentially another 24. We're in and around sort of ballpark figures, another 24 that might be needed.
Get the bare minimum, yes.
And what's the resource gap then in terms of finance, in terms of the money?
And this is it's a really difficult question to ask, answer, because if we open up to the people who we want to offer this to, we will most likely find an unmet need. Because children are not being referred in, they should be referred in because Senkos know there's no point. So significant increase. We're not talking 1 or 2 posts. We're talking that kind of recruitment on a number of occasions. There's only so much only so quickly we can expand as well. If we double the budget tomorrow, we would not have a good service because a service can't grow that quickly. So we must grow, but there isn't a quick fix. If I could magically fix this on the spot, I would. We just can't. We have those 24 posts. We'll go on for another 24 posts as soon as we can after that, and then we just have to continue increasing.
And an assurance be given that when we reach June, schools are looking back over the year they've had, that they will say that was a year where we saw improvement in the support that came into our school for children with SEN, particularly at stage 2.
Well, I mean, will schools feel that? I can't give the promise. What we can show is that we're increasing our staffing numbers to see more children, and we can show the evidence of that. But the reality is that some school will not feel that they have the support that they need. Some school will not have the support that they should have. simply because we don't have capacity. And that would be reality. It would be reality in the summer as well.
Wanted just to pick up, there's a couple of other things I wanted to pick up on. One of them is around the pathways so that exist within LITS. So there seems to be a model of pathways 1, 2 and 3 and children will sit and that's separate to the code of practice stages. So there's pathways within the LIT engagement, and there does seem to be some confusion around exactly what happens at each of those pathways and how children, what the sort of thresholds are to get into the relevant pathways and the differing levels of support. Is there a job of work to be done in terms of communication with schools and SENCOs so that everybody is clear on exactly how this system works and where the support kicks in at different stages? Because I mean, you could visit 5 schools and they all tell you something different about what happens in each pathway. And is there an acceptance that there's a need to do a communication job here on this?
So just to be clear, the original legacy service areas, we worked across a tiered model of support, and the pathways represent a tiered model of support. So it's going from targeted advice at the very lowest level, and at the minute you will see out of I think it's the 2,800 referrals, there's only approximately 30 that have actually gone through to pathway 1. That is the lowest level of support, and that would have been offered from all of our previous legacy service areas. Then the pathways increase with intensity and support. And pathway 2 is again across majority of the legacy service areas was represented in the sense of modelling, going out and supporting in the class, changing the environment and the conditions there, observation, assessment, all of those things that were happening in pathway 2. The exception was probably in the literacy service, where it went from targeted advice and guidance or one-to-one. And that's where we're seeing some of the sort of misinformation and miscommunication. So what we are doing with the pathways, we have put that out to schools in relation to the overview of support at both September and October. And we've also been continuing the training with the graduated response framework that has just finished with primary and post-primary and nurseries at the moment, where we went into more detail on what that was. Again, ideally, it would have been good to have had that training in term 3, but listening to our SENCOs, because the graduated response initial training was term 2 last year, they wanted some time to embed. So we have rolled that out, and that has definitely clarified a lot of the situation, but very much working towards building confidence, and we are getting it back from schools who were sceptical about pathway 2 and actually seeing the benefit across multiple staff in the school to be able to support an array of children with special educational needs and not just one child.
Last question for me, I think, in this stage is around SENCOs, and we've heard evidence from SENCOs at committee, and there is a sense that they are a workforce that is feeling quite a serious issue around low morale and unmanageable workload. And I think the last thing that anybody would want to see if we're going to deliver transformation would be an adversarial relationship set up between SENCOs and the EA, and I don't think that's in anybody's interest. So how will the EA address that low morale? What is being done to ensure that those staff are properly resourced, properly supported with the time and the resource they need to work within this new system?
So when Dale, Robbie and I were here a number of weeks ago, we talked about support packages for schools that for children with SEN. Part of that is about SENCO release, and the language probably got bad funding for schools to allow backfill of SENCOs. That is one way we can support SENCOs to find time to do some of their work. We're also looking at administrative support for schools with children with SEN, to provide some admin support around the administration of admin functions. We will definitely have a package in place by start of next school year. It is again tricky with 76 million or 70 odd million pound deficit. These things aren't free. They cost quite a lot of money. We have a lot of SENCOs, so it's about finding the right balance. What can we do now within the resources we have, which will not be what we want to do, but at least will be a step in the right direction to show some intent, show some good faith from our side. That's something we're working on right now.
Go ahead,
Can I just add that, the role of the SENCO is critical to the support of our children and young people, and we all recognise the immense role that is. Central to this process has been working alongside our Senkos to make sure that we are doing it right, that we are getting the RFI simplified, and we're going to continue that feedback. I've been out visiting Senkos, speaking with Senkos and taking that feedback on. But the other thing that we're going to do next is have that Senko continuous reference group so that we're getting the voice of everybody along this entire journey. Because as we said, this is a beginning, this is a starting point, and we want to make sure that we refine those processes, and we're already doing that with the RFI and bits like that, so that we can increase that confidence and partnership working.
Just, I suppose comment maybe more than question, although perhaps maybe you may want to respond. What I hear from Senkos when I'm in schools, and I visit schools all the time, so I hope this isn't an impression of just throwing out the odd anecdotal, sort of story around this. Senkos would consistently say to me that they took on the role because they really value working with children and seeing the children progress in their educational journey, and children who were facing barriers to the education, seeing those barriers removed. But they feel that the vast majority of their role is paperwork driven and admin driven, rather than actual interactions with children. Is that something that you would foresee as a balance being reset, so that children can actually be involved in doing that work to actually support children, rather than it being seen as really a fairly demanding admin task?
So, on a very simple answer, I would not want a teacher to do a simple admin. That is not a good use of resource. That's a simple answer. There are some paperwork that is appropriate for Senko to do, especially around the assessment of children and those things. But we need Senkos to work with their skills and expertise to do what they're best at. Being a teacher, working with children with special education needs, that's their skill. That's what we need them to do. So therefore we need to find ways to reduce paperwork and bureaucracy as much as possible. And bureaucracy is a good thing, right? Because that's how we have evidence for things work and don't work. That's how we know what's happening. But it's the right level of bureaucracy. That's what we need to do. So it's about finding that balance, and then finding how can we provide support to Senkos and the schools, so the Senkos don't sit and do the simple paperwork, but they can have administration staff who do that. That's the solutions. It sounds very easy to say. It's less easy to do in practice, but that's what we need to get at. It's not our want to bury Senkos in paperwork. That's not what we want to do.
No, sorry if I could just add that. In relation to the request for involvement and the request for involvement portal, we had a group of Senkos involved in devising and developing that, and working alongside us to ensure that it was replicating as far as possible their previous legacy experience of using a school-based consultation form. So all of the questions that we have on our RFI are mirrored from legacy school-based consultation, and we have removed some as well. We've also tried to automate as much as possible of the RFI, with pre-populated sections as well in it. So we've worked alongside the Senkos, listening to their feedback to see what will streamline the process for them and make it as easy as possible. They've also fed into solutions about the digitisation of different aspects of that to help with their workload.
And obviously we need to see how that beds into the system, but Thomas, you used the phrase, we don't want to bury Senkos in paperwork. That is the sense that I get of how they feel. So I think the committee will be keeping a very, very close watch on whether that does improve. Deputy Chair, I'll bring you to.
Thanks for coming today. Thomas, I suppose no system or no model is ever perfect, and we're not expecting that. But there are major fault lines in this system. And one of them is the lack of collaboration and cooperation between health and education. And as long as that fault line exists, this model is going to throw up all sorts of difficulties. So I'm asking you, who's going to fix that, and when is it going to be fixed?
Can I first saying I agree with you that if when we have fault lines in health and education, that is unhelpful for everyone. It gets wrong outcome for children and young people. It makes our life much more difficult. I just want to put that on the record. I fully agree with you. And I'm glad you asked the question, who can fix it, rather than who's at fault, because I think that's two very different answers. I think the fix, in an ideal world, we have perfect cooperation between services, and there's no problems. The Children's Service Cooperation Act celebration event on Monday, the Children's Law Centre held, was brilliant. The reality is that the pressures in health and the pressures in education means that perfect synchronization is unlikely to happen in using old or tried mechanisms. You know, they're saying, do try the same thing over again. That's a sign of a definition of madness and craziness, isn't it? So I think who can fix it? I think put it on us. Put it on us to find solutions. But with understanding and knowledge that they will take some time to do. So there's no reason why EA can't include healthcare as a support service within elite teams, or what I said, alternative support models at stage 3. There's no reason why EA can't employ speech and language therapists, for example. So put that on us. Put it on us to fix it. Saying that I have a significant budget deficit, therefore I need to be smart on how I use my funding, so I can get the best value from that by employing other professionals. Also, setting up those services takes time, because that requires a complete new HR process for us and requires professional accountability and so on. That is not simple things. And we also want to work in conjunction with professional bodies and trade unions and so on. So it takes a bit of time, but it's definitely on us to fix. I'm not trying to put the blame on someone else. Okay. But give me time to get the chance to do that, and don't expect me to fix everything at once, because I won't be able to. So ask me again in June what progress we made, and proper. I mean, because it's realistically, I can't do this tomorrow, even if I wanted to. Okay. So give me the time, and we will. Well, I mean, if I haven't done more in June, you have absolutely right. Have to go with me.
Fair enough. I want to ask you another couple of questions, which in a sense are related, but they're specifically about the Irish medium sector. And in the SEN reform agenda, it stated that with regard to the implementation of lit teams, the department will develop, where appropriate, bespoke services for children in IME settings. And given that commitment, how will EA address the current shortage of bilingual professionals in SEN services? And there's a couple of sub-questions off that. Will there be dedicated Irish medium roles within EA lit teams to ensure this commitment is realised? And what steps are being taken to build capacity and expertise in immersion pedagogy, particularly for supporting literacy development in Irish medium settings?
So I'm very glad you asked the question. I think it's a really important area, actually, we need to get right. And it's incredibly complex to get it right. And we don't have good solutions at this point. I will hand over to Gillian or Ursula in a second, who can talk more about it in detail, but I just want to highlight that I have spoken informally with Irish medium representatives, and I have a full meeting coming up soon. And it's about finding the right solutions. So they were very keen for us not to employ teachers directly at this point, because we'll steal the teachers they have, which would also be wrong. We need to find solutions that are sustainable for the whole sector, and that's really important going forward. So we want to do it with the Irish medium sector, rather against the Irish medium sector, if that makes sense. But I hand over to Gillian or Ursula for details.
Just in addition to that, we have recently released the Early Literacy and Reading Assessment Toolkit for schools, and I've been speaking again with the Irish medium sector, and we are moving towards, I've created some resource. I'm obviously utilising the resource that I do have, and we are looking at creating that sort of stage 1 for that full immersion, the informal assessment toolkit at that stage. So those initial discussions are starting, but I fully recognise that that's where we want to aim to, but working alongside Irish medium education to make sure that we are working together in collaboration to ensure that support is effective. But we also have to realise that we are missing the diagnostic assessments that are needed for the Irish medium sector. So there is investments that is needed to be able to progress that work to the level that we need it.
But there is an equity in the system as well, because the literacy inclusion toolkit that you've referenced, it provides valuable support for pupils in English language schools from P2 onwards. But in the Irish medium schools, it only kicks in at primary 4, because that's when children begin learning English. And that is an inequality that needs to be addressed. Would you not agree with that?
And that is exactly what we're doing with that group, with the resource that we have. So I have managed to secure somebody for 3 days a week initially to do a scoping piece with the Irish medium sector to be able to look at how we could translate the assessment toolkit at key stage 1 for the immersion for the P1 to P3. So look at how we can do that and how we can bring forward that informal assessment side. But again, just highlighting there's still a need for that formal diagnostic side. So we are looking at progressing that, and I look forward to updating you in the next time we come to see the progress we've made.
Okay. Sure.
Deputy Chair. John, you'd indicated first there. Your audio,
Yes,
I think that's you
I'm
on
off
now. Yep.
mute now. Thanks. Yeah, the first question around paperwork. Still, just summarise for me the steps you're taking to simplify paperwork. Because the principals I speak to, have been around a lot of schools, tell me it is just excessive.
Sorry, John, is that in relation to the request for involvement?
Yeah.
To put that in. So the request for involvement form is based on the school-based consultation, which our SENCOs would be used to completing when they were requesting legacy support through educational psychology. So that form, the questions on it mirror what was on the school-based consultation. It's not new. Those questions are the same, and we have removed unnecessary questions as well to reduce that. There's 5 sections in the request for involvement portal. Most of those are automated. Where there is free text, you can cut and paste into that. You can auto save. That was at the request of SENCOs, that they could stop and start and come back when they had time to finish the RFI. So that functionality is there as well. You also get live instant updates about the progress of the RFI through the system, which used to cause frustration at not knowing where your request for support was in the system. Now you get that live and updated on your portal. Once you submit your RFI, you get an email copy to you, so you can keep that for your school records or your child's file, whatever system the schools have in place. So we have worked with SENCOs to refine that over the past 6 months, and as Gillian said, we hope to set up a SENCO reference group so that we continue to get feedback in relation to how we can make further improvements.
Okay, SENCO reference group sounds good. Look, another common complaint for principals is that lit staff are working from home rather than in schools. What is the number of lit staff working from home at any one time?
I would have to disagree with that. Where caseloads, obviously we're at the start of 8 weeks and caseloads are coming in normally in September and October. Caseloads are lower and they'll start to peak now in November according to previous data. So where staff, the fundamental part behind the local impact team model is out in school, direct face-to-face support in schools. And that is very much the pathway 2 and pathway 3 is that is done at a face-to-face level. So again, we'll be monitoring that, especially now as caseloads have increased, but majority of staff are working in schools because there's no reason for them to be at home unless they're doing a piece of work or training, advising, or training and support.
Yeah, I'm just looking at data on that.
Well, I don't have that data with me at the minute, but I can give you active live numbers of caseloads if that would help. So that would give you an indication of staff time. Obviously, there's some staff employed 3 days a week, 2 days a week. So that's difficult to aggregate that, but I can give you data on the number of caseloads per individual person.
Yeah, okay. And I do accept I'm working from home, by the way. So, I just asked the question because I do get it from principals, although this is about 6 hours out of a very long week. Look, the other thing, and I do consult principals in advance of the meetings, and I just collect some of their observations and collate them, and I ask questions sort of on an aggregate of those. So 2 further questions. Some principals are saying to me that the new portals remove their ability to choose which service might be best for the pupil in question. Would you agree that the lit teams need to work in partnership with the principals on the ground? And is there an issue of removing discretion?
I think the important fundamental part of the local impact teams is that this is about the child at the centre. It is child needs led, so it is about the RFI actually details, yes, the primary need, but what are the actual needs of the child in the context of their school, in the context of the graduated response framework, but also importantly their family and the context of the school. So whenever the RFI comes through to moderation, we look at the needs of the holistic needs of the child, and it's not about pinpointing children into boxes. We really need to move away from that. Particularly our children with social and emotional behavioural difficulties, if they're pinpointed down to just the behaviour route, we often don't see beyond the behaviour, which could be along the lines of a literacy need, could be developmental language disorder, and therefore those children are on the wrong pathway. Also, when it comes to literacy development, it is so fundamental that literacy development is based on a sound knowledge of speech and language skills. So therefore, if a child comes through with a literacy profile, our specialists look at the profile and information and are able to see where are the missing blocks. Therefore, it may be more important for that child to have the building blocks of speech and language support first of all, before they move on to literacy. So this is a more personalised, tailored approach rather than going towards an individual specific legacy area.
Look, I'll feed that back. Final question. When the rubber hits the road, we're actually talking about an example, and I asked a question about Sandalford last week, which I didn't get signals you're overly wanting to respond to it. But last week we were told that Sandalford was back open, the children were in class, and of course a couple of days later we were told the air quality reports were different and the kids were now out of class and are being schooled at home. So I just want to say I did appreciate it. I got a call from the EA because I made some queries about that. I have been told there is a meeting this week. One of my staff will be at it to inform the parents.
Question, John, because we're nearly out of time here.
And the question is, can you just give me assurance that everything is going to be done that it possibly can be done to get those special education needs kids into Ballinamore Primary School and not sitting at home where they're not getting the education they need?
It's simple, and it is absolutely yes. That's what we aim to do always. I can also clarify that last week when we said that the children were back in school, they were based on expert advice at that point. There was new expert advice being provided to us on Thursday afternoon, evening time, I believe it was. Last week they changed the position we were at. You have to appreciate we're not building experts, and the people here last week are not building experts. So we're guided by the expert advice we receive. And it was unfortunate what happened, that they were back out. But again, we have to go by the expert advice we have.
All right. Okay. Well, just be keen for an update that when we actually have a date that those children are going to be out of home and actually into Ballinamore, and then from Ballinamore back into Sandalford would be really good.
We're due a written response, I think, from the EA on that, if we want to pick that up maybe even at any other business later in terms of following that issue up. Michelle, you'd indicated next.
Thanks, folks. Obviously, you passed comment today on your staff, and I hope in my questions I have been going into bat for you. I think there is huge potential with the lit teams, but you're not at all resourced to deliver on that potential, and that's a frustration. I actually think it's a frustration even today here, and you kind of say, oh, the department are fully supportive. You're not funded, you're not resourced to deliver on this, you're set up to fail effectively, and that's frustrating to hear when this actually could do something really powerful. It's also a frustration, I don't know if you'll agree or if you're able to agree on this, but this is probably the single most impactful piece of transformation that's going on in terms of SEN right now. And there's a transformation fund that isn't even slightly touching what you're doing. That's right, there's no that transformation fund is not funding the setup of lit teams, that's right?
Yeah, that's right.
So that seems crazy to me that we can have that situation. I want to just, in terms of direct questioning, I want to start with some clarity, and this is again, genuinely wanting to understand this in terms of the early years piece. So my understanding is that non-statutory early education settings cannot refer into the lit teams. Looking at your briefing though, I'm not as clear that there is some kind of pathway, so can you be clear with me just exactly what the position is for non-statutory early years or early educators and the lit teams?
So I'll refer the question to Gillian and Ursula, but just one highlight on transformation funding. So the executive transformation fund is time limited transformation funding. What we need for the service to work is recurrent sustainable funding. Yeah. So this is different funding pots. Then the aims and objectives are not necessarily contradictory. So it's not bad to have that transformation funding. I just want to stress that.
Okay, so in relation to early years non-statutory, so they can be referred in, is the referral route is different. So yes, they can't access the RFIs at the moment, and that's due very much to technology and systems, but it's also due to the fact that there's differences in relation to the legislation, like non-statutories have no Senkos, etc., and there's a greater piece of work to be done in that area. So I have done those costings in the preschool standardisation project about how much that would be to do that. Obviously, we want to continue offering that support, and that support is available, but the route continues as is, which comes from the CDC, the child development clinics, going into psychology, and then psychology onto the system then. So we are bringing them through onto the system, but it's just the how. When they get on the other side, the support is exactly the same as what they would have within statutory.
To kids who are in non-statutory settings being able to access that, so there's not equity between non-statutory and statutory in terms of their access.
The access route is, but again, I would agree that there is that inequity at this moment in time, but we're working to try and simplify that as much as we can. But it does come through, as I say, the child development clinics first to psychology and then through to ourselves.
Then in terms of that becoming more mainstreamed, the piece of work that needs to be done, that's being led through, is that yourselves? Or
No,
that's
outside of us. That's the standardisation project.
And is there a
how we do
timescale
that.
for when that might come through? Can you tell us what the quantity of funding would be to do that?
I've done broad figures, we're talking about £6 million, but there's other aspects. So there's EDIS is probably a big part of that, how we bring those systems in. But it's the employment, system within the non-statutory, which has that challenge. But that's outside of what we do.
Thank you, appreciate that. Again, when I look at LITs, it seems to me that what you need to succeed would be properly supported in terms of resources and getting your baseline of staff in place, the right expertise in there, and then that piece with health. We've already touched on the health side of it already. I'm not clear again in terms of the commitment from within health and from within education to enable you to bring health staff into a truly multidisciplinary offering. Have you got a definite commitment from the top of the organisations that that's something that's going to happen, or is that still in the air?
I want to flip the question, because if we work with health, asking the same questions, we probably got the same answers, right? So this is, and again, it's not having go at health colleagues. I was in Department of Health many years. I value those people very highly. But let's look at other solutions. Let's try to find other solutions that will provide different answers. So let's not rely on healthcare for some aspects of lit support. Let's bring it into EA. So speech and language therapy, use as an example. Why can't we have speech and language therapists in EA? That's working in lit teams, directly in the teams, providing services to children and young people through us, not relying on a pressure health system.
You kind of touched on that with your answers to Pat already. So if there was one thing though now that you could do in terms of your interactions with health that would make a difference, that's quick or easy. We talked about, I think, at our session at the stakeholder event, maybe data sharing, things like that. What would be the key thing that right now would make a real impact between health and education working together better on this?
Quick wins would be data sharing. That's probably less about LITs and more about children that have more profound needs. But data sharing is absolutely a starting point where we can do this much easier. There's a health and education working group, whatever, there's a meeting on the 9th of December, where senior leaders from DE, DOH and DEA are attending.
Very briefly, final comment maybe. Yeah.
A lot of in this talks about feedback in terms of the training and being positive feedback on training. In terms of outcomes for the kids, how are you working with the department in terms of the outcomes framework to capture how this is working for the kids, that you're actually getting better outcomes for the kids who are coming through this system?
Obviously, Gillian can talk about the details, but we have less outcomes data because it's only 2 months in.
So that's feeding directly into the outcomes framework.
You could talk about how we measure data, but that's...
Just the outcomes framework. Obviously, we have to feed into what is it we globally want for our children and young people with SEN, and how each of those streams feed into it. With us at the moment, we have built into the RFI a way of tracking the outcomes, because it's really important that we track, are the interventions that we're putting in place effective? And if we, and that's the bit we need to track in the beginnings, so that then we can feed into, are we providing the right support at the right time, and be able to quantify that with the interventions that we're putting in place.
Thank you. Cathy, you indicated next.
Thanks, Chair. Before we begin my actual questions, there's something that I need to say. It's only because of your staff, because of teachers, because of Senkos, and because of classroom assistants that the system is still going. It's the system that is not working. Your lit staff are being pushed into schools into the firing line. So I think it's actually, you need to have a look at the language that some of your colleagues have used while they've been here giving us evidence, rather than trying to push it on to committee. But I've lots of questions, Thomas, that I need to get through.
Can I say, I'm not saying that it's intentional with committee, I just want to make it very clear, but my staff are feeling under attack and I'm trying to protect my staff, and I'm sure that you would agree with that, so that's why I brought it up.
I think your staff know that we are trying to fight their corner here. Just put that on record. Thomas, you said at the last meeting the number of one-to-one sessions for children has not reduced with LITS. Rather, it's increasing. Do you stand over that?
The numbers are not reducing, yes. Obviously, there are seasonal variations across the year. That's normal every year.
So it's increasing? You stand over that?
No, as I said, that would be the effect of LITS. I said it would not.
Said the number of one-to-one sessions for children has not reduced with LITS. Rather, it is increasing.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So, from my research, literacy teachers used to have, in a number of different areas, between 18 and 21 children on their caseload a week. Now, many of them only have 2 to 3. How do you explain that?
I can explain that. So obviously the legacy literacy model had always had a waiting list of approximately 1,400 children every year. So if that model was to continue every September, that was always a natural feed in to keep those caseloads between 18 and 20. In September 24, we paused literacy referrals into the service because we were, I suppose, just redesigning the plane while it's flying it. And we, again, put resource to be able to reduce that waiting list, and we brought that down to 0. So we started on September the 15th with, I'll explain, there's a 900, but with a 0. Okay, so that meant then, if you look at the legacy data of referrals in the previous literacy, September, October, November, the referral rates were always low. So if we're starting off at 0, then the referral rates are low. So in November, December, once schools get in place, children have been there for 8 weeks, the increase in referrals dramatically increases. Okay, so it went, if you'll see the data that I gave you in the report, in the November it went up to 305 from 40.
There's no data that tells us what it was previous, so we're not able to compare any of this.
But that's what I'm saying. So yes, there was caseloads of 18 to 20, but that waiting list was there. Those levels of support for those children went across a 16-week with a repetition. So what I'm saying to you is that in September of this year, because we went to 0, we're starting off with a new system and referrals have been slower coming in. This time next year, I don't expect to see that same lower level. In some cases, that is increasing and will increase over time.
Do you expect that their caseload will be 18 to 20? Is it not concerning for you that it seems that there's slow referrals coming in?
No, this is the normal. When you look at the data, the trend is over the last 3 years that in September, October, November, that referral numbers are dramatically less and do significantly increase.
Okay.
Would we have provided that or written to you afterwards to compare it?
So again, you said the last thing that you would show us that evidence, and I still haven't seen it.
Apologies, there wasn't enough free will provided
Okay.
to writing. Sorry.
So what I'm hearing when you're talking about money is that you don't have money, so what you're doing is pushing children into pathway 2 and pushing that onto schools. So a practical example, I have a teacher who has 25 children in her class. There's one child who is on pathway 2. She has been told that she needs to provide that support to that one child. What does she do with the other 24 children in her class?
So first of all, can I say that we're not saying that we're pushing children to stage 2.
Well, that's what schools are hearing.
What we're saying is that we can't meet all the children has a need. There's a big difference in those two statements. So
but Thomas, that's what schools are hearing, and that's what schools are being told, that they need to provide that support with no resource coming alongside it. Yes, they're being told how to do it. They know how to do it. They need the resource to back it up. The question is, what does she do with the other 24 children in that class?
But I mean, the unfortunate answer is if I have that much staff that can deliver service to that many children, and there are that many children who have need, I still can provide support for that many children. So I mean, that this is...
So is this model ever going to support the needs of children?
Well, but that's what we need. That's, as I said earlier on, we need to shift the funding into this service, because this is what provides better value for money, better outcomes to children, and reduces need further down the line.
So those children on pathway 2, had you the resource, they would be on pathway 3 and they would be getting one-to-one support?
Not necessarily. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is all pathways are relevant, all pathways are right. It's about having the balanced approach to support. What I'm saying is that overall, the LIT at stage 2 does not have enough resource to deal with all the children at stage 2 require support. That's I mean, and I think it's important distinction.
Is pathway 2 not advising the school,
Yes.
not providing that support to the school? So again, what does that teacher do with the other 24 children in her class? Thomas, I'm not a teacher, I'm not a Senko, I'm not a classroom assistant, so I cannot understand the pressure they're under, but I'm listening to them and I'm hearing it from them. Are you hearing that from them?
Just asked to briefly respond on.
Yes, so you guys come in. So Pathway 2 is more than just advice and guidance. It is about creating those pathways in the school and support in the school. So when a child comes back from support on a one-to-one, or a child is on a Pathway 2, that we are able to sustain that support. It's not just about one organisation, but it's not just about one person doing that support. In order to meet the needs of children and young people, it's that collaborative support. So Pathway 1 involves, and again, this has already been in place for autism, for behaviour, for literacy. Yes, it's a different approach to that, because it's not about keeping that specialist knowledge on a one-to-one in a classroom. It's about how you spread that and leverage that, working alongside the teacher and even attending classroom
I'm not getting an answer
24
on
kids.
what you're supposed to do with the other 24 children in the class, okay? So what I'm being told is, get a classroom assistant to do it then. The classroom assistant's providing one-to-one support. Gillian, you shake your head, but this is what we're being told. These are real examples.
Yep.
So maybe you need to listen to the real examples. The classroom assistant is providing one-to-one support for another child, so they can't do it. They're asked to get another classroom assistant from another class within the school. They're busy looking after one-to-one support on other children. Would you ever stand over a primary 7 student being asked to provide that support?
Definitely not.
Absolutely. So,
no,
I'm going to have to ask to bring this one, Kathy. If I could just come in here, we are substantially over time on this one. So final response, and then we'll move
very
on.
quick response, because I think the answer is much bigger than just let's. The answer is what we touched on last time. It's what support we provide children with SEN across stage 2 and stage 3. How can we make sure the schools are resourced properly to provide that support with local autonomy to make sure we have the right support at the right time. That is absolutely classroom assistance, but it's a wider menu offering.
There's parents sitting at home now whose children are not getting the support that they need. There's children who are falling through the cracks now, and that is what the concern is.
Okay, well, thank you, Kathy. Dana, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Just looking at the presentation that you sent through, I took a couple of wee notes of it. It's interesting because it completely contradicts what we have heard and took evidence from Senkos. Senkos are telling us they're constantly feeling out of their depth with all the changes, with little guidance, feeling isolated with no one understanding the enormities and complexities of their role. In your feedback, say 98% of Senkos felt confident in the supports available before and after submitting RFIs, right? Our evidence of what we had took. Out of 203 Senkos, 141 said they would rate the RFI portal as not so easy or extremely difficult. So balance that for me.
So I have asked Gillian cover in details, but the first point I said is that what I hear when I speak to Senkos, because I'm not speaking to schools and principals as well all the time, is the overwhelming support for this model and overwhelming support.
We have two evidence in this committee, and they were speaking for 203 Senkos and 141 said.
Just maybe let the witness answer the question.
But I'm finding this really problematic, because if we have problem services, I want to know what they are so I can fix them, right? And I hear what they're saying, and I saw the session with Senkos. I want to fix the practical details, the practical problems to have. The general thing that it's difficult is not enough for me to fix the problem. I need to have details. What is it we need to fix, right? What part of the system is fixed? Because when we then do training with Senkos on the system, they go out and telling us in the feedback set after the training session that it was good training, that we understand the system. And I find that contradiction really difficult to deal with.
I find it very difficult because the user then saying 90, I don't know what way user then taking that information.
Gillian can answer that question.
No, but let me just follow on to the RFIs, that's what I'm going to focus in on. Like, what percentage of them get accepted first time?
Okay, so there's only 93% of referrals that come through from moderation are accepted. Only 7% of RFIs are not accepted through moderation.
First time, so you have it's a 93%.
Yes.
So when I'm hearing from some lit teachers or companies saying they're spending an awful lot of time trying to support schools because they're being rejected.
This is the benefits of this system. We have really robust data now, and from those referrals that we have, 7% have not gone through from moderation, because it's not about barriers. The RFI is to provide the information that we need to be able to look at how we can best meet the needs of children. And exactly from your Senko briefing, and I get that point, I added that exact question onto the evaluations for the graduated response framework training in relation to the RFI, because I need to know that, and I am listening. Because that feedback, and we got from 200 out of 271 additionals, 244 Senkos said with exactly the same question that they found 67 found it very easy and 177 found it somewhat easy. I don't want any Senkos to find this difficult, and that's why we will continue to work alongside Senkos, address those issues and make this system better. And that is the RFI, and we will continue to again give that data out, very much changing that narrative so that we are very open and honest.
See, what I hear from when I go into schools is the principals will tell me how much pressure their Senkos are under. Every single principal that I've sat down with has said the RFI process is too time consuming. You're telling us it's simple. I think I wrote down saying it's user friendly, dynamic. Your own, I obviously I can't divulge that the people coming to me, but they are part of the lit teams, and they are saying is not the case. It is not simple. Far from it, and that correlates with what Senkos are saying to us and what principals are saying to us. So to me it doesn't make any sense what you're saying today.
As I said, I'm going on the evaluations completed by Senkos, but I'm also recognising that this is a journey. Some of this comes down to confidence and familiarity first of all, and it does take time to use any digital system. We all know the challenges of that. But there's a point then where if there are additional things, so for example, we're on the fifth version of the RFI system, so that feedback that's coming back from Senko, so that was raised in week 3 about the boxes, that was fixed in the sense that there wasn't enough room for the outcomes to be filled in. That was immediately addressed and changed, and we shut the system down in October to update that, and we'll continually do that.
How do you score then the referrals, and what constitutes it, like from pathway 1, 2 and 3? Because anyone I've dealt with, no one's got past pathway 2.
Okay, well I can give you the figures on the pathway 3. So in the sense there's still children coming through with pathway 3, but the difference is that when the child comes through with the information we have, we look to see the child factors, so what's going on within that child in relation to their specific SEN category. So how is that being presented? What has been done by the school to date? Because it's about taking on board what schools are doing. It's, that's the important bit. And if schools have done everything that they need, then that again is really important to recognise. We also look at children's family factors and what's going on in the actual school as well. And then that is a very simple scoring matrix that we use to look at what initial pathway. But I need to be very clear, the pathways are flexible. This is not about creating further silos. So children can move through pathways, but it's important that we're getting support out earlier and supporting schools with that.
All I can say there seems to be a blockage then, because there doesn't seem to be anyone that coming to me get beyond pathway 2. Can I just ask one wee question on the actual makeup of the actual lit teams, because I know you're out trying to get people recruiting. Are all lit staff teachers?
So lit staff, there's approximately 199 teachers across the lit teams, and then we have approximately about 89 staff that are made up of what we call intervention officers or classroom.
What qualifications do they have?
So qualifications, so they vary. So it can be recognised of at least 5 years experience as a classroom assistant, because again it's a promotion. So it's
not against classroom assistant. I just need to ask it because of the time. But will a classroom assistant then have that casework or caseload, and they would be advising teachers on how to do their job?
No.
Never?
No, so with where there is legacy practice, I'm going to be very honest. So how classroom assistants, we've got classroom assistants and behaviour support assistants and intervention officers, and then teachers if we look at in that scale. And some interventions and previous services did operate in different ways, and we are aligning that now to make sure that people are working within their job description and making sure they're working within their areas of expertise and qualifications to be able to provide that support. And where there's great work, like we've got some fantastic classroom assistants, great experience, and it's about how we are supporting them, but being very fair in the way that they're paid, and again looking at the further work that's needed for the classroom assistant, model and job descriptions. We welcome.
No, 100%. I know classroom assistants do a great job.
Yeah.
It's just trying to get that clarity. So an intervention officer doesn't have a caseload, and they will not be, like, say, giving advice to a principal, say.
No, so if intervention officer would have, it depends what your determination of caseload is, but it's overseen by a teacher. But again, it varied in different areas, and we're working with staff now to get that.
Thank you.
And if there's anything to clarify at the end of the session around any of that, obviously we can follow that up. David, you'd indicated next.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks for your information so far. I think it's right that if your staff are feeling frustrated, that you give voice to that, and without, we don't know what questions it was or anything that caused that, but I think it's right that you speak up for that. And I also find your contributions, not just this week, but particularly Thomas, who's been a regular visitor, trying to be as sincere as you possibly can and give us the information you can. So thank you for your patience and what you've given so far. I don't have a huge amount of questions, and I'm probably going to touch on overlap on some of the things that have been said previously. But it's a concentration of mine probably that in terms of the lit teams and the bringing together of health with education, which has been touched on. The part of the document that you've given us that talks about that health and let's making sport truly multidisciplinary speaks of the aspiration, and it's right. And you're saying look down the road and come back to me in June and ask me more questions then. But it still seems to me to hint at, without wanting to say, that there's some kind of hold-up, resistance, pushback from health. In that way, it says that there's going to be further health engagement scheduled this month. Now, to be clear to health colleagues, it in no means throws them under the bus. But the sense I get is that, look, we're waiting to see what happens from the health end. Can we have more information? What is it from health's perspective that you're hearing is holding up and stopping them from stepping into this space? Because I'm slightly nervous, and I understand it goes against that which we've been arguing for, and I understand the sort of contradiction in terms here. But when you've said, and the Minister said before, we need to look at how we can do that within education, be able to support some of those health staff through the education budget and so on. I get a little worried about that because my experience from, as with Danny being on Belfast City Council, is when one body steps up to help and take something off a government department, government departments are very good at walking back and allowing them to take the whole load. So what are you hearing from health in terms of what the hold-up is? And is there a willingness in them to invest in this and make it work?
I mean, there's good cooperation with health. I mean, the advantage I personally have is that I have been in the Department of Health for a long time. I know those people personally, and we get on very well. And there's certainly no bad intentions from health.
No,
but we have different outcomes. All right. Yes. So health has a priority to provide healthcare treatment.
Yeah.
We have a priority to ensure education and well-being. They're two slightly different things. So if healthcare has a waiting list for an intervention, that waiting list is prioritized based on clinical need, not based on educational need. And that's, I'm not saying that's wrong, it's different. So therefore, we, with the pressures across the health service and the pressures across the whole public sector, we might have to think about how we make sure that our priorities that we need for effective education is a prioritized need for services. And I think in some part of healthcare, it will never be realistic to expect education service to be prioritized. So therefore find different ways of providing the same outcomes. So it's a kind of thing that we try to do the same thing over and over again and we will get some results. Yeah. So let's try something else. Will we get it right first time? I hope so. But none of us are perfect, but let's try something else. Let's see if it works. I met very recently with a doctor from Philadelphia who was over in Northern Ireland speaking to various public sector bodies. She was a doctor employed by the school authority, where she had run its own health service. I think that is unhelpful. Here in Northern Ireland context, that would not be the right thing. But there are aspects where it might be right. And it doesn't mean that we necessarily do everything ourselves, but it might be that we create posts that are protected. It might be it might be better crossover. The exact details we have to work out. But
I guess that's my fear, is how do we stop that developing into a situation whereby EA or the Department of Education become directly responsible for all sorts of healthcare while a child is at school? Because that's a nonsense. You know, it's certainly there are things that can be done with health professionals that will help educational outcomes. I get that, but we have to be very careful that it doesn't allow a department which will be very understandably under a huge amount of strain, as the Department of Education is, willing and able and wanting to find ways to pull back their investment in certain areas. How that, and we're talking, you said, Thomas, and I agree with you. I'm glad you raised it, because I think we have in the Assembly this week, and we're all guilty. I'm not taking it's not any political point. We're very good at picking out things that are wonderful and nice programmes that cost hundreds of millions of pounds and saying we would love that to happen in Northern Ireland. whilst understanding that the Department of Education is under huge budgetary strain. So you're saying if you can only help, if you only got this amount of resource, but there's this many children, that's the reality that you're dealing in. If we're then looking at, and I know it comes as part of reform, but if you're then saying we can start looking at bringing in health professionals, that's a big outlay as well. How do we stop that developing into a situation where it's just unsustainable?
But it might be big outlay, but it might be more
quite a big preamble, so just a brief response.
It might be more effective public use of money. So then we might get a better education outcome overall. So as Gillian said, if someone with literacy need, if there's a speech need first, we might, if we fix a speech need, they might help resolve the literacy need. So there might be in our own interest to do some of these things, and that should definitely not be an educational healthcare service. That'd be wrong. I would be first to agree with that. We need to get balance right here. This is we're at concept stage at this point. We're not at detailed plans or a product. Yeah. So we need to sit down and do this properly. But what I'm saying is that give me a chance to do it properly. That's what I'm saying.
Can I just say in response, Chair, just very quickly, that I admire the philosophy. In many ways, it's what we've been asking of you. I just worry that we're not seeing that same philosophy and ambition from health. And I would like to see a little bit more commitment to it, because everything I read and see so far feels like there's a pushback. And I understand the reasons, but I think there needs to be a change of mindset somewhere in the Department of Health. Thank you.
David and Gary, you indicated.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you all for taking all of the questions, and quite a number have been asked, so mine hopefully will not be too long. But I do want to bring you back to the start of your opening presentation, because you felt strong enough and the issue was important enough to mention the issue of staff and how they feel, and ultimately, you know, their well-being is important. But in terms of the morale piece, that it's not only about the staff well-being, which is very important, but it's also how that impacts then the children and the parents and those that are engaging with those LIT teams. So I want to maybe hone in on how, in terms of those LIT teams, in terms of their feedback, what are their particular frustrations, bar criticism, if you like, but are there particular things that they're calling for, that they see as, look, here's the immediate things that could be done to help improve our situation?
Yep, so do you want to talk about the groups that we do with the staff?
Yeah, so in relation to, you're completely right, our staff are our most important resource, and we are very committed to making sure that we put in place support around them as well. This is a huge transition and transformation for our teams and our staff as well as for schools. So we've worked really closely with our staff during this process. We've set up task and finish groups throughout the transformation process and allowed staff to nominate and indicate areas that they were interested in supporting the development of. We also use the Take 5 Steps to Wellbeing approach when we are setting up any staff development activities, etc. So we want to ensure that that is embedded into the LIT model, that nurturing approach for our staff is fostered throughout the LIT model as well. So we look for opportunities to engage with staff regularly. We have LIT reflection sessions every month. We have drop-in sessions every Monday as well with specialist teams, so we have opportunities for staff to feedback.
So a big point is that, I mean, this is a big change program. Change program is difficult. Change program is really difficult. We will obviously do a proper post-project evaluation further on, where we identify how we can do things better, because there will undoubtedly be areas where we could have done things better with our staff. I mean, they'd be foolish to say the opposite. So that's big. But giving a promise to important as well.
It's very early days, so we have to allow time, and it is frustrating because as MLAs, of course, we get the worst cases. That's why they come to us. We don't. Very rarely do people come. Well, certainly not to my office to say, you know what, well done, guys, you've done a great job. Usually they're coming to say there's a problem. So I have sympathy with MLAs raising that, and I suppose it's how it's done in a way that it's not just we recognise that there's good work being done, but there are specific challenges. In terms of the I have to say the detail in the paper I thought was fantastic, and if only all departments brought forward such level of detail, I think it would be very much welcome. Comparison with the old system and the LIT system, it would be useful for us to sort of get in terms of that monitoring of that. So you've obviously laid out the benefit or the potential benefit. Not all of that has been realised, obviously. But is that something that you plan to do in terms of that sort of format for us, in terms of monitoring providing that level of detail as to, for example, the issue around the contact system. There were 39, I think it was 39 different numbers, and now there's one portal. There's so many different areas. There's 11 different areas that you touch on in that table. Can that monitoring be provided at that level?
Of course. I mean, one of the big changes I want to do in how we talk about SEN in EA in general is probably much more openness and honesty with the data. So not just here, but also about the statutory assessment process we talked about last week and other things. We don't necessarily publish some of that stats and those things regularly. I think we should be doing that. So that's something we're working towards. And that absolutely goes for LETS. It goes for the statutory assessment process. We have nothing to hide.
No.
Right? I mean, that's when we don't succeed, we should say it openly. But when we are successful, we want to be able to show the evidence as well. So we want to show that, and we have no problem providing that to the committee. We have no problem providing that to the public.
Well, thank you, and just as I say, just certainly on our perspective, thank you for your openness, because it is a challenge, and as David has said, he's sort of skirted around it in terms of the reality is we do have to be realistic in terms of the budgetary position, and as politicians we have to look at what we can achieve and be honest with the public, because if motions have been passed in the Assembly, which actually literally cost hundreds of millions of pounds if you were to do what has been passed, but we have to be realistic. We can't on one hand propose those things and at the same time expect you to move mountains. And that's something that we have to grapple with, not only as a committee but as an assembly as a whole. But thank you for your time. I appreciate that.
Can I make a quick comment?
Just briefly, Deputy Chair, and then we'll close the session up.
As Guy has said, quite a number of people from LIT teams have approached us in Sinn Féin, and some of them are actually afraid to give us their names for fear that they'll be identified. And okay, it's not a massive number, but it's quite a significant number of people who have approached us. And there does seem to be a sort of culture of fear that if they are identified, as having been critical, that there will be repercussions in some way. Certainly that's the mindset that's there. And I'm just wondering, have you carried out any sort of well-being survey among staff within the LIT teams?
So first of all, excuse me, that concerns me, because I want to have an organisation where people can speak completely openly. I mean, I enjoy the sessions and I mean it, and I enjoy having challenging discussions, because that's how we get better outcomes, right? It's not personal, it's about getting better services.
Absolutely.
So I mean, I just want to stress that I really, I mean, if that is a culture within EA, that is something I want to change. I just want to give it that assurance, because that is not what I want. I want people to speak open and freely and express their views, right? So I just want to say that first of all. When it comes to well-being surveys, and the answer, simple answer is yes.
So just to add to that, it is vital. Our staff are fundamental to making this work, and that's why we've had the reflection sessions, because we are encouraging staff to come forward, and we are very much practice, the trauma-informed, our whole idea of solution focus, come with a solution. This is the model. How can we make it better? And I would not want any staff to feel that, and that's why we have been open and we have had those meetings, face-to-face sessions. We're having further TUS sessions coming up.
But Gillian, it's one thing having face-to-face. It's another thing to have a survey where people who had complaints aren't being identified,
So the survey, the draft survey, wellbeing survey is with our TUS colleagues at the minute, because I want again to make sure that it is reflective and is what's needed, and that it will be going out to staff as soon as I get that feedback, which should be in the coming days.
Okay, thanks for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for your evidence today, and obviously that will all be fed into the inquiry report. So thank you again for your time. We'll have a quick feedback now if there's anything else we want to pick up, but thank you for your evidence.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, so obviously as with all these sessions that will be fed into the committee inquiry. Is there anything in particular that anybody feels we need to go back to either EA or department on for any further clarity at all? Kathy?
Just on that question around the number of referrals, that blind question I had, not the number of referrals, sorry, the number of children who are receiving one-to-one teaching, not what pathway they're on, but who are actually receiving one-to-one support, but the comparison on previous, because we do have figures there, but we don't have specific on one-to-one sessions, and we don't have specific comparisons. Please.
Is that a particular service or across
the LIT teams? Yeah, if it could be broken down into the services, that would be extremely useful. But
our members are content with that inquiry going?
I'm a bit dubious about that 93% straight away referral when I asked that. I need to come back with my own digging on that there, but I'm really sceptical of it.
Okay. So we'll obviously we can pick any of these issues up at any time through the course of the inquiry, but we'll close that evidence session unless there's anything else from anyone.
Yeah, well, there's been an offer to have an informal meeting at Academy Street where you might ask these questions and really bottom them out, and maybe have actually the personnel in the building to address the specific queries that you have. But I'd obviously need to know in advance what areas you wanted to focus on.
Certainly, I mean that is reflected in the forward work plan, and might be one to pick up in terms of how whether there's appetite for that or anyone's interest. But it's probably worth noting that offer has been. I think it's come through the department. Is that right? That offer, but to include the EA. David, did you want to come in?
We had talked previously, and I don't mean a joint meeting with health, but we had talked about the possibility of whether we could get health officials in front of the committee around LITs. I just always feel like education officials don't want to be throwing people from other departments under the bus, and we all understand that the pressures in health are probably as great, if not greater than most departments in that regard, so we understand why that, but I think we need to have some honest, frank discussions with health officials about how committed they are to this, what they're willing to put into it, and what are the barriers that they face in that regard, because I mean, even that the information that we got from EA there seems to just, if you're reading between the lines, there's meetings to come. It feels like they're wanting more from health and they're not really getting it. And we've been getting that since we just started discussing impact teams and so on. That we're just not getting the commitment from health, who want to do things on their own side and maybe link in now and again with education, which is not what the spirit of impact teams is.
I think there had been an issue. It certainly became clear to me when we had our concurrent meeting with health at Middletown with the chief allied health professional there that actually evidence from her was that she doesn't commission services, so actually was quite limited. She was there really to represent the workforce, but it doesn't have a commissioning role, so perhaps wasn't the person who could speak to the issues in the way that we would like. Is there, first of all, we'll suppose through the clerk, is it feasible for us to have health officials to speak to this inquiry? Does that require health committee involvement, or do we have scope to do that?
They didn't well, so I had some discussions with the clerk, and the forward work plan is such that he didn't anticipate we would be able to schedule something in the life of the inquiry. Now the life of the inquiry has crept a little bit. It's but that the committee should definitely correspond about anything that came up. And in particular, the common interests were around transition and the kind of 1% of children that have really severe conditions that require very, very special handling.
This is in relation to concurrent meeting, is it?
Yeah,
so that's what I wanted to check.
So
Is there capacity?
There wasn't capacity to do a concurrent within the time frame of this inquiry.
So is there is there capacity or scope for the education committee to call health officials here, or do we need a concurrent format to do that?
I can look into that. I mean, I think it's possible.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly seems reasonable. It comes up fairly regularly. I think Michelle first, and then Danny.
Well, just Evine's point there. We had questioned whether we could get a concurrent meeting, so are we being told now we're not getting that?
I think if I've understood the clerk, not within the life of this inquiry, a concurrent meeting, but not sent for the duration of the mandate.
And the other question was, because there's we're still asking for a lot of stuff. Do we have the tracker yet in terms of the things that we're asking for, and whether
we have an Excel one under development. It's just we have got a lot of material back, but we don't have it completed just now. Sure, we're filling it in. Be with you ASAP. Sorry.
That's good. Just like I say, we're asking for a lot of stuff, but nice to know what we've got back yet. Actually, see the responses.
Yeah. Well, you are getting all of the inquiry, all of the replies as they come in your inquiry folder.
Yes, just to keep on top of it. Thank you.
Okay, and Danny?
Yeah, it's just a wee suggestion on the back of the evidence. We've had Anne Thompson a couple of times, and fair play to come in answering the questions and they say, look, give us till judges later down the lane.
And apparently enjoying it. So.
Yeah, and enjoying it. Which,
maybe not after today.
Which is fair enough.
But he's gone home to get tied up in the dungeon.
But I suppose the big problem of it is it's all right us asking them the questions of it, but it really is conflicting, and we only have one evidence session with Senkos. It's just about, before we come to the end, it's getting more front-facing staff in here, your Senkos, you know, the school leaders, because if this is still the same things being said as we go into next year, it would really be alarming.
And I suppose ultimately it's for us as a committee in terms of the recommendations that come out from this. If we remain of a view that there is more needing to be done to support both the lit staff and the Senkos in school, then we need to be making very clear recommendations in that regard. So I think it is important.
They're very convincing that the portal's working. It's completely different to all what we're hearing. That this is not streamlined. This is very much a disaster.
I would just add
competing evidence bases that contradict each other entirely. I'm not saying anybody's telling us lies, but there is something to bottom out there. And it is a wee bit frustrating. Some of the stuff in the briefing is like, we did a training course. If you do a training course and you get a response, you go, yeah, that was great. But it doesn't mean when you get into the real world that when you try to apply it, that it's just quite as straightforward. And I don't think people are being malicious either with it. It's just genuinely trying to find a place where this works and understand exactly where the issues are. I think they want to know as well. Like, I think they really do.
I think that's the nail on the head. I don't think that they're coming here and being dishonest with us. Yeah. I think what's happening is that whatever feedback models that they're using, people are not responding to them with the same complaints. And it may be an issue that Pat's raising, that, you know, people are weary that if they're the ones that raise their head above the parapet, as you would in any organisation at times, be a bit sort of fearful. But people are coming, as Gary said, to MLAs with concerns that they're not, and frustrations, and probably articulating them in a very different way than they are whenever they're asked by line managers how they feel about things. And I think they're articulating what they know from their side as best they can, and you're getting it from the other side as well. It's two different stories maybe, but I don't think I was being dishonest.
Well, I think at that stage, I think we've noted that we definitely are seeing a picture emerging of sort of competing evidence bases emerging. I would just add on the referral for involvement portal, it's temporary as well. It's going to be replaced with something else. So there's a worry of a lot of work going in to equip staff to deal with something that's going to then change again, which I don't necessarily think is ideal. But I think just in terms of that action, if maybe to pick up around what scope there would be to engage with health officials, I think we raise it enough times.
Anybody in particular?
I think it's going to be around the allied health professional involvement, because that's what would need to be plugging into the LITs.
So the people who came to Middletown.
Potentially. Well, I think the issue with the chief allied health professional is that I don't think they have a commissioning role, but the officials around that would be the issue.
We probably need some kind of senior official who's responsible for that area as well, who can speak to it from departmental level, and what are the blockages there, rather than, because you don't want just the people who will be responsible for, you know, the coordination of the role. You need someone to speak to why it's not a priority and why it's not something that they're doing.
Perhaps those officials would be a starting point. Perhaps I would have thought so. Okay.
Because we had the very good ones at the round table, and some of them were on my table, and my reading of it was that they were saying something similar that you would hear sometimes from lit ones. They're not getting enough time with children. They're stuck with bureaucracy themselves, so that could be something there.
Okay, conscious of time, members, so item 9 then is correspondence. So that is pages 183 to 431 of your packs, and I don't think there's anything in tabled papers actually, so it's just what you have in your packs there. Oh no, sorry, there is additionally in tabled papers relating to item 9.2. There's an extra bit tabled there. So I'll just go through. There's a summary note, page 183. I'll just raise anything that would require a committee discussion or decision. Item 9.2 on page 185, it's correspondence from the Finance Committee, and it's regarding the Department of Education response in relation to queries about the legislative basis for the clauses specific to the Education Department's remit. And the Finance Committee had asked our committee, if it is content with clause 11 as drafted. So I'm going to ask the clerk to speak to that. There is a brief tabled for you in tabled papers, and then members will just have to make a decision around whether we are content with the clause as drafted. But I'll just pass to the clerk.
Yeah, so the brief that is tabled just sets out the background. As the Chair has said, the Finance Committee is asking for you to sign off on clause 11.
Which I should have said Administrative and Financial Provisions Bill. I don't think I actually used that.
Oh, okay. So an Administrative and Financial Provisions Bill is can be quite a large kind of Christmas tree of a bill, and it has kind of central provisions, but also then some provisions that relate to individual departments. So clause 11 is about the Department of Education and specifically the responsibility for educational psychology places, and that is being transferred. So you can see that the researcher for the committee has asked a couple of questions, namely where did the responsibility originally sit for this, and what has changed, and those are clarified in the reply that was given by the department. So those are the only queries that have been raised. If members have other queries to raise or to bottom out with the department, I can raise those now, or the committee can accept the research that has been done and proceed to agree the clause.
Well, my understanding then of the purpose of the clause is that it is to allow the department to provide financial support in connection with the postgraduate degree in educational psychology. I'm not sure that the clause allows us to do anything around how much they should be contributing to that. We would probably all say we would like to see more, but my sense would be that the principle that the department should contribute towards the funding of the postgraduate degrees in ed psych is appropriate. That would be my view, but happy to hear from other members, or if we're content to agree that clause as drafted. Agreed. Agreed. Okay.
So I'll advise the committee.
That's fine. That's grand. So we're moving on then to items. I'll take a few of these together. 9.3, 9.4, 9.8 to 9.11, 9.13 and 9.18. They're all submissions to the committee's inquiry into SEN provision and transformation. So are we content that those all get added into the evidence for the inquiry? Are we all agreed? Agreed. That takes us on then to item 9.6. It's correspondence from the OECD Global Parliamentary Network inviting members to take part in an online seminar. I would suggest we note for diaries. Are we agreed? Item 9.7, page 213. It's correspondence from the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists providing its response to the review of the Northern Ireland curriculum. Would members be content that we extend an invite to the Royal College to attend our February stakeholder event on curriculum review? Agreed. Item 9.12, page 256, correspondence from an individual in response to the strategic review of SEN provision, providing a freedom of information response from the EA and highlighting some concerns in relation to that. I am happy to hear views, but I would maybe suggest that we go back to the EA and seek a response to the specific concerns about that FOI, if members are agreed. Agreed. And then item 9.19, page 428. This was referred to earlier in the meeting. There was a wee bit of a technical glitch with our packs that meant that the material wasn't actually tabled as anticipated. It did seem to be some sort of technical glitch with that. I'm going to just propose we stay in open session. I'll not refer to any of the specific detail in the correspondence, but it's essentially from an individual querying some of the professional credentials of an individual who is associated with education and special educational needs. My sense would be that it's not a matter for the Education Committee to make inquiries into someone's professional credentials, but it would be courtesy to share it with the individual names so they're aware of the correspondence that has been circulated with members, but I wouldn't propose any further action if members are agreed. Agreed. Item 9.20, apologies, I'm dosed with a cold. I'm a runny nose here. Item 9.20 on page 429 is correspondence from the EA's McGilligan Field Centre welcoming the committee's motion on outdoor learning. It was provided to members in advance, so you should all have seen it so they could draw on it during the debate, and I would want to just suggest that we do write to Michael from McGilligan to thank him for his input on this issue and his assistance in relation to the motion, if members are agreed. Item 9.21, page 431, is correspondence from the Department of Education indicating that it plans to share the new SEN regulations with the committee before the end of the year and offering to provide a briefing on these. Now, anybody who's followed issues in relation to SEN will know this as a been a long-standing saga progressing through the education system in terms of these regulations, so I would want to suggest that we request sight of these at the earliest opportunity. I think we'll see when we come to forward work planning. We may struggle to fit a briefing in before Christmas, but I would certainly want to see that scheduled at the earliest opportunity afterwards, but with earliest sight possible if members are all agreed. Other than that, are members content to dispose of the correspondence as per the summary note? Is that agreed? Mm-hmm. Okay, forward work programme, item 10 on the agenda. That's at page 434. I'll ask the clerk just to speak to this briefly. I think it's largely self-explanatory. There's a couple of things that need picked up, probably just in relation to that proposal around a visit to the EA for some sort of informal briefing, and that's come through from the department. But I'll ask the clerk to speak to the plan and the programme in the first instance.
Yeah, so there were three things really I wanted to mention. We did glance on it earlier. On the 3rd of December, DE officials are available to come and brief the committee on the uniform guidelines if members are agreed to, or if they want to have that briefing. On the 7th of January then, the scheduled briefing from DE and EA can't go ahead because of unavailability of some of the witnesses, and there is a proposal that members could go to Academy Street to discuss some of the intractables about the Sen inquiry and making sure they have understanding of the processes. That could happen in that space potentially if members wanted to have like a less formal kind of a return to term after the recess. And the other thing is on the 3rd of February, mentioned a couple of times when people have written in about curriculum review, we do have a booking in room 115 from 4 until 7 on that Tuesday the 3rd of February, and I would propose that some of the people who've written in present, so maybe Institute of Physics or Quill on History or Senior Student Union on Languages, Queen's on Sustainability, Environment Link as well. And then we have the round table as usual just to gather in views because the committee's not really had a chance to address that in the round. So that's all I wanted to mention just now. I don't want to overload you.
No, look, that's been really helpful. I mean, if I can maybe pick some of these up and then we'll get endorsement for the programme. There's one probably that needs just a decision, and it's whether or not we want to pick up that briefing from officials around the uniform guidelines. My feeling on that would be that we did have a lot of assurances from the officials about what the guidelines were going to do. I think when they have arrived, been less than impressed. Certainly would be my interpretation of it in terms of how impactful we think they're going to be. And I certainly think it would be helpful to hear from officials to give them the opportunity to articulate why they're saying these guidelines will be effective so we can understand what it is that they see is going to be the outworking of this. But it will be for committee to decide if they want to hear from them. I think schools are a little unclear as to exactly what the impact of these is, so it would be, I think it may be helpful to hear at least the department's articulation of what they are saying they believe they would achieve, but happy to hear from members.
Chair, I'm not particularly inclined to want to hear from them because given the evidence they gave previously to the committee and the commitments they give to the committee, I mean, how do we take at face value what they're going to tell us about the guidelines? Having said that, I mean, if others do want to hear from them, I'm not going to object. So,
okay. Any other views, Michelle?
I think it would be helpful. I think it would help us at the kind of post-legislative scrutiny we was talking about, but talk about it at that stage yet. But I think it was what we were waiting for was the guidelines. I agree with you that there's ambiguity in that. So if they could speak to provide some clarity that might be helpful to schools and their interpretation of what the intention is, it wouldn't put anybody in a worse position anyway.
Yeah, I mean, my sense is that there is a loop to be closed there of guidelines that were promised, assurances that were given in the chamber about what the guidelines would achieve, and I would like to hear from them how they are articulating that they will be there, they are making good in those assurances. I'm not convinced that the guidelines do that, but I would like to hear their articulation of why. David?
Sorry, I'm relaxed. I mean, we were obviously more supportive than others around this, so I imagine others will have different questions. But I do take the chair's point around there are those that are feeling unsure around them, and actually it probably would give us give an opportunity to them to get clarification. So I think in general probably supportive.
Can I just make clear, I'm not casting aspersions on the officials themselves.
I understand that.
And, you know, I think they've been and can be directed to give particular evidence, and that's fair enough. So I've made the point.
Okay, no, that's fine. So look, we will. I suppose that the question is that if we do hear from them on the 3rd of December, it is 3 briefings, which I know members aren't keen on. So if we are not feeling it's a priority, we can push it into the new year. But my position would be that I think we should hear from them at some stage. So if we've got a feeling,
the 3rd, yeah.
We're agreed. No objections to the 3rd. Okay. The other issue then, just very briefly on the 3rd of February event, I think those roundtable stakeholder events have been really successful, and I think it would be a good opportunity to do a bit of a deeper look at the curriculum stuff, which we haven't had the opportunity to look at in too much detail. On the EA visits, would need a view on this, so the department have proposed this. If we were going to do it, I don't think we have scope to be really taking time out of plenary days or anything else to do those sort of things. So I think it would be the first session after recess, and I would be suggesting if the EA are prepared to give a space at Academy Street to use that for a strategic planning session, it may be a good opportunity to scope out exactly what the pathway is in relation to the committee bill, and if that also afforded an opportunity for an informal briefing around as the clerk puts it, maybe some of the intractables and maybe some of those competing evidence bases that we're identifying as we go through the process. I mean, I am open to that, but I know there is always a balance to be struck around what is done in an informal setting and what is done in public settings. So I'm happy to hear from members. I have no strong feeling on this. Do members have a view in terms of what I would need to know if there is an appetite for it? Otherwise, we can run a regular open session committee back in January. Is there an appetite for a briefing of that kind, or an appetite for a strategic planning session, and also?
Well, I'm not sure what we would hear at a meeting like that we're not hearing at committee. Again, I mean, I'm not overly enthusiastic, but I'm not going to object if other people want to do it.
That's fine. So I'm just looking for Michelle.
I'm not sure that there's huge value in it for us. I think if anybody individually thought that was something that would be valuable, they could maybe pick it up themselves. I'm not sure a whole committee
it would be my sense. I mean, I'm not
appreciate the offer.
I'm not opposed to it, and I understand, I think, where the offer's coming from.
Yeah.
You get different evidence in public session you do in closed, but I think there's a transparency issue as well around making sure the public are clear that there's nothing being discussed privately that we're not comfortable to get out into the open session. So I imagine parties are taking forward meetings with officials and in the EA separately on various issues. So if we're content on that. On the point of a strategic planning session, are we keen just to crack on with a regular meeting? I imagine with the pressures of a committee bill, that might be the best way to progress after recess. Okay. Other than that, content to endorse the forward work programme as drafted? Oh, sorry.
Yes, something for the forward work plan. We did a session today on educational underachievement, which was really good, and it's something that we have an interest in. I was made aware of a really good report that Sean Millis have done on effective school leadership in disadvantaged communities, and it looks at 13 kind of high-performing post-primary schools. I just wondered if it would be helpful to maybe bring the authors in and perhaps some of the principals of the schools involved to give us their perspective on what's working and why it's working in their schools.
Be very happy to support that. Well, we can see if they're free on the 2nd of January. I think when you're looking at the independent review of education, they picked up on those schools who sit with very high proportions of free school meals with really good outcomes, and they said there is a piece of work to be done to see what are those schools doing. So I think that's absolutely perfect.
Do you want me to share the details of this?
Please, that'd be great.
Just something else, Chair, in terms of if we could fit it in. It's probably not something you'd have a full session on, but maybe when EA are coming in about something else, could we have someone who could speak to it? Speaking with Cheryl Brownlee, and know she's had some engagement with parents as well. She talked about an issue around school meals for some SEND young people. Obviously, we know that some with particular difficulties can be resistant to some foods and so on. We're talking about school meals, and the the thought is that there are many free school meals so on that go unused, and there's wastage because they don't cater necessarily to the dietary needs. And when I say dietary needs, our school meals are looked at from a nutritional point of view, but for many with those difficulties, they can only eat certain things, they will only eat certain things, and their diets may not be nutritionally perfect, but if the provision is not matching what they will eat, then they're not getting the benefit of the provision that should be there. I wonder if we could have someone from EA that could speak to that on how they can or may be able to look to it in future, adapting some of the meals provided that allows for provision for those children who do have difficulties around that.
Briefing in the first instance, David, do we think?
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
Well, yes.
I come in there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, John, yes?
Chair, I've been raising this, and I did write to the Minister. I've been touring schools and heard up to 50% of wastage with young primary school children. And the general view of catering staff is they know what the kids will eat and what they won't eat. They'll say that won't go down at all. And they know the stuff will be thrown out and the kid goes hungry. Some of them just say, look, can I have dessert? And I know there's an emphasis on nutrition, rightly so. The sort of Jamie Oliver factor, but it's better children have something than nothing. So I do think this is a really, really important issue, and there's more discretion and flexibility given to the schools.
Can I make a suggestion then potentially John and David feed in through the clerk? And I'm content if we have broad agreement to seek a written briefing on that issue in the first instance.
You're happy to talk to John. I didn't realise John, but happy to talk to John when we're saying.
Yeah,
that's fine. And Cara?
Yeah, no, just wanted to come in to back up David and John there. There's a disorder called ARFID, which stands for Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder, which is essentially children with sensory needs only like in specific foods, just exactly what David had mentioned there. But it is something I would get a lot at a casework level, is parents are really struggling, not only in the home, but at school to get their child's nutrition met because they only like really specific foods. So just wanted to highlight that, as I know parents who have children with ARFID will be keen to put that to committee.
Well, again, let all the members feed in through the clerk. We'll get a written briefing and we can take it from there.
It just seems like an area that probably is worth looking at in terms of the Senate inquiry, but we haven't maybe thought of just yet. So.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, item 11 then. Also, that we're content to endorse the forward work programme. Are we agreed?
Yeah.
Agreed. Item 11. Any other business? Nope. And item.
Any other business? No.
Oh, sorry, Carol.
Oh, yes, I just wanted to flag. It's an issue to do with an EA site that is no longer needed, and I'm trying to summarise the issue effectively. It's basically my constituent wants clarity from the EA, and once they're done with the site, this site pertains to a school canteen that is no longer used. And an individual constituent of mine is looking for clarity around essentially this family has the right for first refusal of the land, and it's an ongoing issue. It's taken up to 3 years, and they're looking as a committee, can we explore a clear explanation for delays and assurance that the EA will take responsibility to come forward with more communication when doing these kind of handbacks of land that they no longer use. I hope I articulated that okay. It's quite a complex one.
Thanks, Carol. My initial feeling is it feels probably like a more of a piece of constituency casework. Is there something particularly on a broader level that you're looking the committee to look at?
It's just the process itself, Chair. I know we don't usually bring individual issues. It's more the process itself, just looking clarity on what the timelines are and the timeframes when handing land back, if that makes sense.
Okay, well, if committee agreed, we can seek some clarity on that. I don't think we could get involved in that individual matter, would be my sense, in terms of the individual like transfer of land. But
I think there's probably a point to clarify on asset transfer and maybe the role of EA in that, and any prompt payment or that kind of threshold.
And just the timelines, like how long does cases like this usually take?
If it's a sort of civil,
but non-specific
matter,
to this issue. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll maybe let you link in with the clerk in relation to that, so to make sure we've captured the specifics. So then, item 12, date, time, and place of next meeting. That's scheduled for next Wednesday, the 3rd of December, 2 p.m, room 29 and online. And that just leaves me to put the question that the committee meeting does now adjourn. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you.